Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So a topic that I've covered quite a lot over the years is that of TradWives. You know, women who want to be perfect little stay-at-home housewives focusing on cooking, cleaning and raising the children. They want to be in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant, while their husband provides for everything financially. He's the hunter-gatherer and blah blah blah. They say that that is a woman's place, her only place, and she should be submitting to her husband and his every whim. These are the women who think feminism has ruined everything and made life harder for everyone, especially women. They completely ignore the fact that they wouldn't even be able to choose to have that lifestyle today if not for feminism.
Okay, so I'm here to make a clarification video because of the big controversy going around about the term TradWife and the intent behind the term, as well as the intent behind my channel and what I post. If you are not familiar with the term TradWife, it is a woman who chooses to live a more traditional life with ultra-traditional gender roles. So the man goes outside the house, works, provides for the family. The woman stays home and she's the homemaker. She takes care of the home and the children if there are any.
I want a man who leads. I want a man who's a provider and will protect me. I'm not going to listen to him. Do you see how crazy you sound right now? If you want that, you better be willing to listen. You cannot do this for every man, but once you find the right one, you'll be able to trust and follow him blindly, him lead. And yes, I realize you can lead yourself, but when you find a man that you're willing to let lead you, number one rule as a trad wife, this is your duty as a wife. A man's home is his castle, so he should be treated as a king. He's working a stressful job, maybe working long hours, just so he can provide for you and the family. So he rightfully deserves peace. That being said, it's every wife's duty to appreciate her man and all his hard work. Show him how much you truly appreciate him, okay? He is your king, and you are his queen. That is your duty. We're TradWives. We believe in gender roles in our marriage.
We're TradWives. We believe a clean home is a happy home.
We're TradWives. Always obey our husbands.
We're TradWives. We choose to stay home and support our husbands.
TradWives. We always have dinner ready when our husbands get off work.
TradWives. We always satisfy our husband's needs.
TradWives. We wouldn't be caught dead in a bar or club without our husband.
TradWives. We always respect and appreciate our husbands for their hard work.
So what would happen to a modern day TikTok posting, right-wing grifting, #TradWife if she was really transported back to a time when women had no rights, no freedom and no choice? That and so much more is explored in Caro Claire Burke's new novel, Yesteryear, which looks at a #TradWife influencer and what the effect is on her spouse and her children and what the lifestyle is really like behind the camera. I have been so excited to read this book since I first heard about it, and it did not disappoint. I gave it a proper 5 stars, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive into it like I do with a lot of my book reviews. We're going to be going, you know, step by step, line by line, but there's also so much in this book that I didn't even have time to talk about in this video, so it's one that I really recommend you go out and read for yourself. That said, what we are going to be talking about, there are a lot of spoilers ahead, so please be warned. Our book opens with part 1, The Past. Our main character, Natalie Helen Mills, wakes up in her cozy farmhouse in Idaho just before 6 a.m. Her radiator is pumping out heat, making her toasty and warm. She's gloating about her perfect life, how she's never struggled with anything because she's disciplined and sober. She tells us about her husband. My husband was not disciplined before he met me. He was the youngest of 5 boys, the runt of the litter in an American dynasty. His father was the latest senator in a long line of US senators, currently barreling through a presidential bid. 3rd time's the charm. His mother was a homemaker who'd spent most of her life drowning in Chardonnay. Together, through a near-fatal combination of parental neglect and maternal sympathy, they had raised Caleb to be so soft and spoiled and sweet. But the only thing more valuable than a person with God-given traits is a person who's willing to learn, and my husband, that man, had been willing to learn. Meanwhile, she describes herself as a flawless Christian woman, the manic pixie American dream girl of this nation's deepest, darkest fantasies, the mother every woman wanted to be and the wife every man wanted to come home to. Like a nun in a porno, it didn't make sense, but also, by God, it worked. They live on a farm with a dairy cow, chickens almost ready to be slaughtered, her husband, 5 children, and a 6th on the way. Natalie makes her own bone broth from scratch and lives a perfect little TradWife life that she posts about regularly online. However, what her audience don't see is all the help she gets behind the scenes. Nanny Louise, a godsend for our family, was at the stove making pancakes. Producer Shannon, my right arm, was by the kitchen sink getting the video equipment prepared for a long day of work. Stetson and Samuel, my darling young men, were sitting at the table shoving and pulling one another in equally groggy measure. Clementine, my eldest, the girl who made me a mother, was at the head of the table, ignoring her brothers and reading a book. Nanny Amy, our second in command, was moving through the far corners of the house, waking up the littles, kissing sleepy eyelids, tugging my 2 toddlers gently forward into the day. She would bring one to the table, hand her over to Nanny Louise, and go back to get the other. I closed my eyes and whispered my daily thanks to the Lord for everything he had provided me. My hand moved instinctively to my stomach, resting at the height of the curve. I was 32 years old, 6 months pregnant with our 6th child. It had been the easiest pregnancy to date, though all my pregnancies, relatively speaking, had been smooth. I was born to be a mother. I never felt more connected with him than when I was tasked with carrying one of his creations. So this immediately was giving me Carissa Collins vibes, although Carissa didn't have easy pregnancies at all, but this idea of, being made to be a mother, having so many babies, constantly popping them out one after the other, very Carissa Collins. Natalie's internal narration prays to God. Thank you for watching Over the Farm Animals, Lord, and thank you for helping us pass 5 million on Instagram this week. We're only a few souls away from 1 million on YouTube, Lord. It's through your will and your will alone that I've reached so many hearts and minds. It's in your name that I work to spread your truth. This is such an accurate portrayal of Christian influences, isn't it? They're so happy to sit there and say that, when people are murdered, it's all part of God's plan. Like, oh, it's just God's plan. And that it's also somehow his plan for you to get to X million followers on social media. Like if a God really did exist, do you really think he'd be letting kids starve on the streets and letting people be murdered, letting genocides happen, letting people's basic human rights be taken away, but also sitting there and going oh, well, you know what, I'll help you get to this many followers on Instagram? Crazy. It's just weird priorities, isn't it? I also love this part here because it's so damn accurate. What we had now in terms of help was more than enough for the time being. It allowed me to be present with both my children and my followers in all the ways I wanted to be at all the different points throughout the day. That's the thing about being a mother and a wife and an influencer all at the same time. It's basically like breastfeeding 3 babies simultaneously, like seducing 3 lovers at once. And this really reminded me of when Candace Owens was going on and on about how being a mother is the most important thing a woman can do. I think it was on a debate on Jubilee. And she was like, yeah, being a mother's the best thing you can do. It's the only thing women should do, blah, blah, blah. And then the person she was debating was like, wait, but aren't you a mother? So why are you here? Why aren't you with your kids now? And she was like, yeah, well, influencers like this, like the Candace Owens in the world and like Natalie in this book, they make money off telling women that the only thing they can and should be doing is being a mother and a wife. And if you choose anything else over that path, you are wrong and you're sinning and you'll be miserable. And yet they regularly choose their job and their career and influencing and going to these debates or making content online. They regularly choose that over their family or at the same time as their family. And it's just incredibly hypocritical. It's like when we see Natalie say that being a mother, wife, and influencer is like having 3 babies or 3 lovers. She's clearly putting all 3 things on the same level of importance. She considers her career as important as being a mother, or as we'll find out later, more important. As important as being a wife, or more important than being a wife. She'll never admit to this online because she's only making money by saying that she's a wife and mother first. And she only gets influenced by telling other women that that's what they should be doing. But what she tells others to do and what she does herself is not the same thing. There's a lot of hypocrisy there. We do see it all the time, though, with so many of these women online. Just Pearly Things does it constantly. Candace Owens, Brett Cooper, classically Abby, they all do the same thing. Natalie goes on to say, I rarely paid attention to the differences in the children. Both the girls and the boys spoke similarly, laughed similarly. Their clothing was a rainbow of neutrals. The same pile of olive and tan and ochre had been tumbling down our growing family tree for over a decade. Again, sorry to keep drawing comparisons to real life, but this is something I found myself doing throughout the whole book, and so you'll keep seeing it. But again, this reminded me a hell of a lot of Carissa Collins. It's like when Carissa posts like a birthday post for one of her kids, and she tries to list out the things, you know, she loves about that kid, like Angel's so great because this, Anissa's so great because this. I think they all have A names. I can't actually remember them, but I think they're things like that. And she's like, you know, this boy likes basketball like his dad. This girl wants to be a mummy when she grows up. This child is really funny. And they're all really generic things. You can tell she doesn't quite know the distinct personalities of her kids, but she's still trying to make it appear like she does, you know? Natalie goes on to describe how the facade she posts online isn't all that real, but she claims she's only doing it for her children's own good. She says, people refuse to believe my babies were as amenable as they appeared online. There's no way this is their actual life, the angry women would write. That's what Caleb and I called them, the angry women. To which I would reply, absolutely nothing, of course. A mother's main task is to protect her children from the world. There was no need for some hateful witch in Manhattan to see how physical Samuel got with his brother, and even his sisters sometimes. No need for them to witness Stetson's daily tantrum over arithmetic. I love that boy, but he had not been gifted with a standard helping of brains. If the angry women found out about any of my children's failings, they'd go crazy with blood first. They'd also be devastated. This is super interesting because labeling people online who question or criticize them as the angry women, again, feels very akin to Carissa Collins and also Morgan of Paul and Morgan. You can tell that this author seriously did her research. And it's interesting because I've been on a real writing kick this week. So apologies for my appearance. I know I'm very scruffy right now. My hair needs dyeing. I'm in a bit of a state. But I've been writing this week. In the last 4 days, I've written 5 video scripts. Something like 130 pages of script have been written. So I'm a little exhausted. And I've literally just finished a script before this one. And it was about Morgan and her friend Carl, their 3rd episode of their podcast. So I've written a script about that. And the entire first half of the podcast is them complaining about people hating Paul and Morgan online and how awful the comments are. And there's a lot of Morgan being like, well, I just don't care. I don't listen to them anymore. Meanwhile, she's actively in the comments section arguing with people and making video responses to these people. It's a lot. Anyway, my point is, you can tell that Caro, the author, she really did her research on this community. There's clearly a lot of influence taken from fundie influencers, and you can point out this and be like, oh my god, this is entirely Ruby Frankie, this is definitely Carissa Collins, this is Morgan saying this is, and she knows how these real women act in the real world, and she's brought all of these real people together to influence this fictional character. And yeah, it's very well researched, very well done, and I really enjoyed it. Some people are like, oh, this is just anti-right-wing propaganda. That's a review that I saw. Other people are like, oh, this is too far for satire because people would never do this or this. I'm like, but they do. They really do this. This really is what these people are like. And when you spend enough time watching these communities and listening to them, you see these things. And the fact that she's done that and captured it so well in this book is really, really commendable, Anyway, sorry, little tangent there off script. So as the family go about their breakfast routine, that is, the nannies look after the kids, the producer gets ready for the day of work, and Natalie just watches over everyone, we find out that producer Shannon has been having nightmares for quite a while, and Natalie says they're a message from God because, well, Shannon had misbehaved. We actually find out later what these nightmares are from, and oh my god, is it bad. Blaming this on God and Shannon misbehaving is just major victim blaming here. It's interesting. Once I read through the book and going back over it again, you see so many different little things in there. It's definitely a book that's worth a second read. It's great. Other than this, there is a lot of TradWife talk and fundie talk, the commodification of children and lots of talk of training the kids, which reminded me a lot of Michael and Debbie Pearl and their horrific book To Train Up a Child, which I've covered quite a lot on this channel. I covered it years back, when I first started my channel. It was my first video to get 1 million views, and it's a really horrific book. And then a few years back, I kind of did where are the pearls now, and did an update on a few bits of their content, including that book and some other books they put out and what they were doing today. So if you're interested, I'll leave them linked down in the video description as further watching. But yeah, this talk of training children, definitely a pearls thing. Natalie says, it was a particularly special gift from our creator that we had been blessed with 3 girls in a row. All children were gifts from God, of course, but groups of girls, little jewellery sets of 2 and 3, that was something else altogether. A girl was lovely, a boy was nice, but girls, plural, were rainbows and fluff personified, radiant balls of delight. Such community-oriented creatures with the addition of each new little lady to their little lady tribe. They all seemed to grow a little taller, glow a little brighter. They carried each other like dolls. They braided each other's hair. They picked and preened and poked at one another with motherly obsession. So you've also got the parentification of children there, thinking they're all mothering each other. The boys would keep us fed when we were old and feeble. You know what? Again, coming back to it and knowing what we know at the end, that is a very good bit of foreshadowing, I'll say. The boys would keep us fed when we were old and feeble, I like to say, but the girls, they would dance around our wheelchairs, toss rose petals over our graves. Plus, I'll admit it, they were easier to train. The boys occasionally resisted or got frustrated or bored, but not the girls. They could perform on film for hours without complaint, just like their mama. Yeah.
Okay, editing me jumping in. I'm hoping there's not too much background noise at the minute. But one of the things I found really interesting here is, while watching this back in editing, I just want to add in, I've mentioned how all the kids have real distinct personalities, and we don't really see any character development for any of them except a little bit of Clementine the eldest, and in a later part of the book, another eldest child called Mary, and a youngest one called Maeve. Other than that, none of the 4 boys we see in this book have any distinct personality. The 2 little girls here don't have any distinct personality. And in any other book, I would probably be critiquing this for being like poor writing, because why include these characters that you're not going to develop? But in this, I really have to praise it, because that is the point in this book. This mother has so many kids, it's almost like she doesn't know what to do with them. She's collecting them and then kind of like putting them on a shelf. It's kind of like overconsumption, but with kids. Of course, she doesn't really know their distinct personalities and who they are as individuals, because she doesn't care. She just thinks she needs more kids for her Instagram posts, more kids to show people that that's the godly thing to do. It's like these people who sit there on camera opening 20, 30, 40 boxes of Labubus or whatever the cool thing is these days. Those dumpling things, I don't know, and whatever. It's like the people who just keep opening them and opening them and opening them because they want more and more and more. And they don't really necessarily go back and play with these individual things or care about each one as an individual. They care about the total amount they have and how it looks. So in this case, since we don't have any character development for them, I think that is in itself character development for Natalie, and I just think it's really well done.
When Natalie's eldest daughter Clementine, who's 12, asks her mum what a TradWife is, she replies, "I opted for casual ambivalence. The worst thing you can ever do is let a child know that you care. I know that trad is short for traditional. Some people call women like me a traditional wife, for obvious reasons. By some people, I meant the angry women. The angry women were the ones who called me a TradWife, who said trad like it was short for something evil, like traditional wasn't a fine word in any sane person's universe. But these women were not sane, nor were they happy, nor were they big believers in personal accountability. Instead of asking themselves why they spent so much of their precious time on Earth scrolling through other people's lives when they could be making their own home-cooked meals or even offering eye contact to their own children, instead of asking themselves why they spent so much time bathing in their own rancid jealousy when they could be building their own lives into something they were proud of, they were apparently far more interested in drinking a bottle of wine each night and typing their little hearts out in online chat rooms about me. I suppose I'm assuming these women were winos, but judging by the number of typos riddled throughout each of their messages, I'd call it an evidence-based assumption." It's a lot there. Again, feels very Morgan. And we see her hypocrisy as well, and there's like a lot of projection from Natalie throughout this book where she projects her own insecurities onto these other women. She goes on to talk about how she has 6 anonymous burner accounts to comment back to these people, ignoring the irony that makes her just as bad as them in a lot of ways. She's also wasting her time reading about this stuff online and commenting and arguing with them. Again, very much like Morgan. It's weird. I remember like a few years back, I got like a message from someone being like, "Oh, I think I found like your Reddit account, but it's like really obvious it's you, so I don't know why you're hiding it." And I was like, "I'm not hiding my Reddit account. It's my name. It's Rachel Oates." And they were like, no, this one. I'm like, "That's not me." And I don't know what the username was now, but I was just like, that's not me. So I think it's weird that like a lot of people think that having like these private burner accounts is like normal. But at the same time, I'm like, I can barely keep track of posting like my actual content. Like that takes a lot of energy. I don't have the energy to sit there and like anonymously pretend to be someone else. But anyway, Caro, the author, has definitely captured the fundy hypocrisy perfectly. Natalie goes on to narrate, "Before these women called me a TradWife, they'd called me a religious zealot, or zealot, a cult leader, a breeder. Compared to those names, TradWife seemed mild. I don't personally think celebrating tradition is bad, I said. Do you? The two littles shook their heads. No, Mama, we love you, Mama. But Clementine just stared at me. So, you're saying you are one? I felt suddenly like I was being deposed for a lawsuit. Clementine, why don't you just tell me who told you I was a TradWife? No one, Clementine said. In a flash she was bored. I was just asking a question. Jeez. So Natalie thinks that she must have seen something on one of the nanny's phones, and she tells us that as Clementine's getting older, she's almost a woman now, and so cannot be trusted. So the day goes by with filming content, including multiple takes of natural moments, and there's a revelation that her husband Caleb's life online is just as fake as hers. So sure, they have a farm, but he only does the easy jobs that he enjoys. Everything difficult is taken care of by hired farmhands. We find out later that a lot of these farmhands are Mexican immigrants, and there's quite a bit of racism towards them, so just to warn you, that will be coming up later. The whole first part of this book is also interspersed with Natalie sort of giving an interview or answering questions. At the time, I didn't know if these were like maybe for a magazine interview or an on video interview or something like that, but they're definitely like Q&A, like there's a question and an answer and that sort of thing. We do find out later what these are, so I'm not going to spoil it because it's not until the end of the book, but just know that they're here. At one point, Natalie says that the nannies she employs are like family, and the anonymous interviewer pulls her up on this and says, "Did you just say your nannies are like family?" Silence. I'm sure you understand that there's a long and controversial history of white women calling people who worked for them family. Longer pause. Soft, knowing smile. No, that's not right. Soft, unknowing smile. Better. Next question, please. So maybe it's... Sorry, I'm playing with lip gloss while I'm doing this. But maybe it's my Englishness or my working class background showing here, but I wasn't actually aware of this being any kind of issue when I first read the book. But it turns out, it is heavily tied to racism and class divides and power imbalances. So I did some research on this, and it's kind of a horrifying history behind it, but it goes all the way back to slavery, and it's usually about the people in control trying to blur boundaries and get extra unpaid labour, especially emotional labour, out of either employees these days, but originally slaves. So saying the people who work for you are like family has like this horrible racist classist background, and it's pretty disgusting. So that was another thing that I really liked about this book, because even though this world of fundies is something that I'm very familiar with and have obviously made a lot of content on in the last few years, I still felt like it was opening my eyes to certain aspects that I didn't know about, I wasn't yet educated on, and so it's really helped me understand these other things, and I really like that. I always love learning something when I read a book, And the thing is, there are absolutely ties between the TradWife lifestyle and white supremacy, so I think it's really good of Caro, the author, to show this in so many subtle ways in the book, and also in so many not so subtle ways. She just lays it right out, and like I say, I enjoy that I learnt something here, so brilliant. I really do have a lot of praise for this book. I think it's great. There are a couple of little criticisms I have about it here and there. I'll talk about those at the end. Just things that I kind of wish she'd done a bit more of and stuff like that. But we'll get there, don't worry. On the whole, really love this book. So this is followed by Natalie taking her girls with her on one of her monthly visits to Target, where she bumps into an old school friend who she clearly hates. I paused, looked around, pretended to be confused, when really I was thinking, oh, Jesus Christ, not you. Vanessa, the friend, apparently grew up in a bit of a fundy family herself, and she had a lot of trauma from that, but she managed to get out of it. Natalie judges her for this. Vanessa had grown up in a strict, devout family, much stricter and more devout than my own, but she'd since emancipated herself from her parents, and now liked to write long-winded diatribes about her terrible upbringing via Facebook statuses that garnered, on average, 3 to 5 likes a pop. Vanessa wanted the world to know she was modern now. She'd changed. The irony of Natalie doing the exact same thing but on the other side is not lost on me, Just because she's got a bigger following now, that's not how she started out. She did still start out with, not many people following her. She's doing the same thing, two sides of the same coin. That's what I'm trying to say. Self-proclaimed progressive women like Vanessa were chemically addicted to hating women like me. I knew that. I knew this woman got embarrassingly drunk at family parties and pulled up my Instagram page, showing anyone stupid enough to walk past that she knew this woman personally. She knew her in high school, before launching into some recycled slur of a speech about how all traditional people are idiots, all religious people are idiots, all people who choose a different lifestyle to hers are idiots, 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 when what she really wanted to say was, I'm so nauseatingly jealous of this woman I used to know that I think it might actually kill me. Again, the irony, the projection, it's perfect. Women like Vanessa with their expensive latex foreheads and their I'm with her bumper stickers, they didn't know what they wanted. They couldn't possess a truly principled stance even if someone injected it straight into their faces. Lord knows they couldn't take responsibility for their own lives, so they blamed their unhappiness on me, the dumb, ignorant, backward-thinking TradWife. Never mind the fact that I graduated in the top 3 of my high school. Never mind that I got straight A's at Harvard studying global religious history while Vanessa ping-ponged her way through the rooms of the club rugby house at Michigan. Yes, I'll admit, I checked in on her Instagram from time to time too. See what I mean? The hypocrisy here is so damn accurate. I was only 6% of the way into the book here and I already knew I loved it. Natalie then rants and rants before calling Vanessa the C word in her head and saying F her, and then apologising to God. Not to Vanessa, who she silently offended, but to God. Because apparently it's worse to, like, swear in front of God than to insult someone who used to be your friend. Really shows what Natalie's priorities are, doesn't it? She cares about appearing to be a good person, not actually wanting to be a good person and be good to others. Natalie stresses that Vanessa is going to out her online as having been in Target, so she decides to post an online video about it, first asking the kids what they got on their very special trip to Target. This again feels very Ruby Frankie, getting the kids to perform on camera, like, you know, just at will. Ruby Frankie before she joined Connections though, and all the child abuse came out when she was still just like a family vlogging channel. That's what this bit reminds me of. However, when she points the camera at her eldest daughter, Clementine tells her to stop filming me. I froze. My face flooded with heat. She'd never done that before. Not once. And this absolutely throws her. She doesn't know what to do. She's never had a kid talk back to her like this before. Later in the interview segments, Natalie refuses to answer a question about children's ability to consent being posted online. And then we get a time jump to later that night. Natalie gets an email from the producer, Shannon, saying that she's quitting her job. Natalie, I'm writing to let you know that I won't be working for you any longer. Between what happened over the summer and all the nightmares, it's clear that this job isn't good for my mental health any longer. I've got a bus ticket for later tonight. I don't need a ride. Nanny Amy is going to drive me to the station. For what it's worth, I don't think you're a bad person. I just think you're confused. Please tell the kids I love them, Shannon. P.S. I'm sorry for screwing up your content calendar. So I was like, oh my god, a mystery. What happened in the summer? Why is she acting so weird? Mystery, intrigue. I'm here for it. Turns out what happened pretty horrific, and the fact she stuck it out this long, credit to her. Natalie's response, how dare she? I suppose it was the tone of the email that got under my skin more than the email itself. Such faux maturity, dripping with unearned condescension. Exactly the type of letter you would expect from a 21-year-old. Exactly the kind of letter I would have expected from Shannon in particular. That lost little lamb, that stupid little bitch. Sorry, Lord. Sorry. Natalie is so damn awful, but she is spot on as a TradWife, which is why I'm a little bit obsessed with this book. It's funny that a lot of people seem to think I'll automatically hate a book if it has an unlikable main character or narrator, but for me it's only if, like, the author's intention comes into play. Like, if the author's trying to tell me that this awful person is a good person, or that, like, they're the romantic, sexy lead when they're, like, a rapist or something. I'm like, no, I can't get into that. I can't get behind that. That's ridiculous. Stop trying to convince me that this terrible person is someone I should root for. But if the author goes into it writing a bad person, and we know they're a bad person, we know the author thinks they're a bad person, but they just want to write this complex character with, like, some good points and a lot of bad points and whatever, and show that nuance, I'm here for it, you know? John Fowles as the collector does it really well. This book does it really well. I'm all for that. Like, it's very clear that Caro here is critiquing TradWives and online influencers and family vloggers. She's not trying to portray them as, like, the best thing ever and make them super sympathetic while they're doing horrible stuff. So for that reason, I enjoy this book, and I like having this complex, dark, not protagonist, but main character, you know? As Natalie is processing the information about Shannon quitting, her husband Caleb tells her that his dad, so her father-in-law, thinks it's about time that he run for office, and we get a little bit of background on Natalie's father-in-law too. His name is Doug. And he plays a big role in this book. I would say he's kind of like a Donald Trump type figure in this world. Caleb's father wasn't just a senator. He was a bona fide political icon. He'd been in office for 4 decades, running uncontested every 6 years. Okay, that's not the bit that's like Donald Trump. Like, you'll see it later. What I mean by Donald Trump is, like, the money and the political views. Anyway, he was a war veteran, that's not Donald Trump. He was a war veteran, a family values traditionalist, the kind of guy most people described with an abject sincerity as a real-life John Wayne. They weren't wrong. Doug Mills was broad-shouldered and confident, the ultimate patriarch. Yeah, see, now I'm reading this is not Donald Trump. He's very, like, typical Republican politician in these parts, but there's other parts where he just tries to, like, buy everyone off with money. That's what I mean by the Donald Trump type stuff. Anyway, nearly every comment he made to another man was accompanied by a hearty clap on the shoulder. He was, if polling was even remotely accurate, about to become the next president of the United States. He was also my closest ally. What my father-in-law and I both knew, there was no otherwise. There was only this plan, a very delicate one, in which two variables, my producer, my husband, were taken care of in one fell swoop. And then, oh my god, we get this revelation. I would just like to pause here and say another woman would have cracked years ago. I don't think you're a bad person. A bold thing to say to the wife of the man you've been effing. That was the word I was looking for. Bold. The whole email was so hair-raisingly bold that it might have caused another, lesser woman to have a complete nervous breakdown, to throw her phone across the room, to hiss at her stupid, useless, can't keep his penis in his pants husband. Look what you've done. Not me. As I stared at my philandering moron of a husband, I gave myself a mental pat on the back for all the work I'd done over the years to harden myself against the world. We were facing down the barrel of our first PR disaster. I could already see the headlines.
Allegations royal Insta-famous family. Jumping in because apparently I mispronounced this entire line because I was trying to read italics without my glasses on.
Even worse, is Natalie Hella Mills a cult leader? Former producer speaks out. So now I was getting like Sam and Nia vibes from this, more Ruby Frankie vibes. Yeah, absolutely wild. I was so keen to see where this goes. Part 1 ends with Natalie wishing to herself that her husband wasn't so spineless and complaining to herself that he's not naturally masculine enough for her. Part 2 is titled The Present, and in this we get 60-odd chapters, I think it is. So this is the main chunk of the book, and some people said they found the timeline of this book confusing, but really it's alternating between a kind of present day, or like a present day in Natalie's life, where she wakes up in this 1800s-esque farmhouse, and then flashbacks to her life from like being a kid living with her parents and her younger sister, to going to college, to her life and becoming an influencer. So there's like the 1800s life and the flashbacks to kind of present day-ish, if that makes sense. It will make sense as we go through it. So in the first chapter, Natalie wakes up to a freezing cold house, colder than she's ever been in her life. Her bedding isn't her own, or she doesn't think so. Her alarm hasn't gone off, and she's panicking and confused. Her phone isn't there, and her first thought is that she's been abducted. But then, she hears children laughing. Her children? She finds herself in a house which isn't her house. It looks almost the same, but with nothing modern. She walks into a kitchen and she finds children, but not her children. 4 of them, 2 girls, 2 boys, all wearing raggedy-looking clothes that remind me of a pioneer reenactment. The oldest, a dark-eyed girl who looks to be a teenager. Her hair pinned and plaited. She's like Clementine, but not Clementine. She's also the only one who isn't looking directly at me. She's braiding the little girl's head with perfect, unyielding focus. All these children look like they could be my children. None of them are my actual children. But the kids are calling her mama, and yet she's like, I've never seen them before. Who the hell are they? And like, this is proper horror film stuff, and I love it. So just as a reminder, so back in like the real world, like the kind of present day-ish, when she's like an influencer and she's dealing with all this stuff, she has 5 kids. She has Clementine, the oldest, then she's got Samuel and Stetson, 2 boys, and then she's got Jessa and Junebug, and then she's pregnant with another baby. In this like 1800s world, as I'm going to be calling it, she's got, well, we'll be introducing them, but she's got 4 kids. The oldest is Mary, and then there's 2 boys called Noah and I think it's Abel, and then the youngest is Maeve. So she finds markings on the kitchen door of like her children's heights, and there's like little, what seems like dates next to them. So there's like Maeve, 1852 to 1854, Noah, 1853, Abel, 1854, Mama, 1855. No Mary on there, interestingly though. So she heads outside and she sees that where once there was her modern fancy barn and a modern fancy chicken coop, they've been exchanged for old, simple versions which are a bit worse for wear. You know, they're definitely falling apart. This is the same landscape she's used to seeing, same mountains in the distance, same everything, but everything looks older and more worn. It's also a lot simpler. And then she sees her husband, and she says, this man's eyes are not my husband's eyes. This man's eyes are black and cold and dead. The more I look at him, the more unfamiliar he becomes. He's Caleb, And then he's a distant relative of Caleb's. And then he's a stranger, an older man staring at me in the dead of night. Distantly, I register how cold I am. I look down at myself, take in the strange nightgown I'm wearing. A floral cotton thing I've never seen before in my life. He still calls himself Caleb, but she thinks that he can't be him, so she gets scared and she just runs. She's like, I'm running off this farm, I'm gone. She runs and runs and runs as far as she can, as fast as she can, because she does think at this point she has been kidnapped. Even though things look the same, she's like, I must have been kidnapped. When Caleb catches up to her, she spits and she swears at him, and then the man wipes his face with the back of his sleeve. Then he says, a good wife doesn't speak to her husband that way. He rears back and slaps me so hard, the whole world turns black. So he's like a proper typical patriarch in the kind of world we had before feminism, where it was okay for a man to hit a woman, where, you know, what the husband said went, wives couldn't speak back, you know? The next chapter, we get a little bit of Natalie's backstory. So this is what I mean about the timeline shifting back and forth. So this is kind of like, you get these flashbacks. When she was 10, it turns out her father left her mother to be with another woman, so her mother and the kids all moved away and pretended he was dead. I'd be lying if I said I missed him, but I did what my mother said, because this was the world I was born into. A world where good Christian women moonlighted as crisis managers for their good Christian men. The rules were laid out at church service and Sunday school and over the dinner table each night. The job of a woman was threefold: be a mother, be a wife, and keep the household clean. Oh, and don't forget to smile. When she got a scholarship to study at university, her mother worried because, in her opinion, the world was a mess, like the outside world, the real world. Who would want to venture outward into the world when the world so clearly had lost its way? Out in the coastal cities, nuclear families were an endangered species. Children ran barefoot in the streets while their fathers philandered in third-floor walk-ups and their mothers smoked crack on the stoops. Some women didn't know they were women anymore. Some men didn't know they were men. The birth rate was plummeting. Humanity was self-immolating. The white race was going extinct. So, a lot of right-wing talking points there. A lot of white supremacy talk. Did I say right-wing or white-wing there? Because I meant right-wing, but with a lot of white supremacy undertones. That's what I'm trying to say. Words is hard. And then, with a reminder to be nice to everyone, Natalie leaves her mother and her younger sister and gets on a plane to go to university. This is interesting because throughout the book, Natalie is constantly being told by people to be nice, and she just never is. She's not a nice person, and that is really to her detriment. Chapter 3 in this section talks about how Natalie and Caleb were living in the 21st century and how Natalie wanted that 1800s aesthetic, but with all the modern day functionality. So it was very much a facade, this trad lifestyle. You know, she wanted to look like she was doing everything traditionally, but really, she had all the modern conveniences. I wanted the dishwasher and the microwave and all the modern kitchen appliances to be hidden from view. I wanted a clawfoot bathtub absolutely dripping in natural light. I wanted wide plank floors that felt like they'd been ripped straight out of the Mayflower herself. I wanted all the aesthetics of the olden times and all the amenities of modernity. And I wanted this seemingly irreconcilable set of desires to be somehow reconciled via a series of impeccable design decisions. It's quite hard to say. Back in the past, which is actually the present, but you know, the 1800s world, she wakes again in her odd bed and her odd quilt, and her eye socket is pulsing where Caleb hit her. Her whole body is sore. And as she begins to piece together where she is and learn about these new children around her, she also realizes, oh my god, I'm no longer pregnant. She was 6 months pregnant, the last thing she remembered, and now suddenly, no baby, that's gone. Again, this is the stuff of horror stories. The only thing I think more scary than going from being 6 months pregnant to not pregnant overnight is to do it the other way around, you know? She returns again to the kitchen where the eldest child in this world, Mary, a girl, is making soap, and Natalie thinks back to how in her regular life she'd often do this for video tutorials, you know, to make money and just for fun. Whereas in contrast here, this young girl is making it because she has to, because they need soap, because there's no other way to get it, no other place to get it, there's no other option. There's a flashback chapter to her first start in college and being peer pressured into trying alcohol for the first time, hating the whole thing, really feeling out of place. There's also something else that happens around this time that I'm not going to touch on now because I'm going to mention it later when it's more relevant, but we'll come back to it, don't worry. Chapter 5 is back to the 1800s, as I'm calling this period, and Natalie notices the similarities between this kitchen and her one at home. So, same big sink, similar items in the cupboards like flour, seeds, syrups, but there's big differences too. In this kitchen, there's no hidden pantry containing a massive refrigerator, 2 dishwashers and a microwave. There's no laundry room with a shelf of chemical-free, scent-free, dye-free detergents. No bathroom either. Through the kitchen window, I can see a small shed by the chicken coop, undoubtedly an outhouse. I am actively, at this moment, ignoring the nerve cells screaming upwards at my brain about how badly I'd like to use it. The bedrooms are in the same locations, but instead of bunk beds and Pottery Barn bureaus, the children's rooms have straw mattresses and exposed wooden shelves, each of which holds a few piles of ratty-looking clothes. So clearly the realities of this life which she's been idolising for so long are starting to hit her. She's like, oh, maybe this isn't as nice as I thought it was. Chapter 6 is another college flashback, this time with a little bit of racism sprinkled in from her mother. Every Monday evening, my mother called the dormitory phone line at 7 on the dot to ask me how the week had been, how my social life was going, had I met any French girls, what about Irish ones, were there any, deep breath here, Jewish or Muslim girls in the building? Did they pray in front of me? Did they smell like me, or was the odour different? So I see where Natalie's not so subtle undertones of white supremacy and racism come from. It's clearly been handed down from both her mother and also her father-in-law, as we'll see later. Natalie also goes on about being shocked by her fellow college students and their silly little liberal ideologies. The boys complained about power hegemonies and overseas military interventions, waving their uncalloused palms, even their fingernails unnervingly clean. As for the girls, they proclaimed their horror at the wage gap between the sexes. No one was grateful to be here. As far as I could see, no one was grateful for anything at all. They all planned to be wives and mothers, yet they absolutely hated men and kids. They talked about nuclear families the same way they talked about nuclear bombs. It was a destructive, sexist, militaristic, heteronormative force designed to ruin the world. Literally, they would add for emphasis at the end of every statement that they made that could not possibly work in any literal sense. Literally. When they talked about stay-at-home mothers, specifically their stay-at-home mothers, their eyes didn't go misty with gratitude. Instead, they argued bravely that old-school femininity was a scourge. Any woman who chose to stay at home instead of working in the world was complicit. Any woman who identified as a homemaker was both a victim and a perpetrator. Each night, after 2 or 3 hours of this kind of group discussion, the girls would say goodnight, and I would slowly put my nightgown on, feeling lightheaded and a little bit sick. I felt like I was being waterboarded to death by modernity. And apparently even when taking a gender studies class, Natalie was getting into arguments with the lecturer, bringing up right-wing talking points. Well, yeah, but Natalie got into this intense debate with the professor the other day about biological differences. She had all these studies lined up in her arsenal too, like bam, women are physically weaker. Bam, men aren't good at domestic chores because their eyesight is designed for predatorial work. Bam, the female body is designed to nurture. And what do you think of that? The professor was so peed off, the girl said, and laughed. It was honestly hilarious. I kind of love this portrayal though, because I think this is how a lot of right-wingers do see colleges, not just in America, but all around the world. They assume that they're all just like breeding grounds for crazy left-wing ideas to spread, and that everyone who thinks those things is just dumb and brainwashed by like liberal propaganda, rather than like, okay, well, these are educated people who are forming their own views and these are conclusions they come to. Maybe there's something in that, you know? I did enjoy when her roommate Rena called her out though, and Rena is a recurring character throughout this book, not necessarily on the page, but she's constantly referred back to and spoken about. So Natalie got really judgy one night, and in response, Rena said, "You're mean, Natalie." She was slurring a little bit, her tongue anaesthetised from vodka. This conversation would have never happened if she wasn't drunk. You roll your eyes when we talk, you make little comments under your breath, you think we don't notice, but we do. And you're extra mean to me. You ignore half the things I say to you, and I think it's because you're jealous of me, because I have friends and a boyfriend. And I said at this point in my original script, like, I don't think Natalie was jealous of them. I think she was just judgy and narrow-minded. But I do think she was mean, and I can see why that was called out. But honestly, as the book goes on, I think Rena was right. I think Natalie was very, very jealous of them. And she continued to be jealous of them. And she keeps being jealous of them right to the end. Like, really, really. So I do think this is spot on. In response, Natalie just keeps thinking to herself about how sorry she feels for these people because they obviously don't believe in God like she does, and so she's like, oh, I pity them, blah, blah, blah. She says, my mother had always encouraged me to be a shining light for others, but I was certain that no level of illumination would save these women from the horror of themselves. If anything, they seemed to revel in the pitch-black aimlessness of their lives. They were proud of it, happy to wander blindly forth into a lifetime of selfishness. It was deeply disturbing. Most disturbing of all was the fact that these lost, hateful girls thought someone like me should inherently be jealous of someone like them. No effing way. Sorry, Lord. I'm not jealous of you, Rena, I said. I closed my book on my finger to keep the page. Then I looked at her. If anything, I feel sorry for you, because you're unintelligent and you lack creativity. But most of all, I feel sorry for you, because a person like you will never know true wonder, not once in your life. Her mouth fell open. You are such a bitch. Well, I tapped my finger lightly on the golden embroidered cross on the book cover. I don't concern myself with the opinions of whores. You see what I mean? It's just mean as hell. Absolutely horrible. Like, I don't condone her roommate calling her a bitch either. I should add that in. But yeah, this is a lot of the stuff I've seen from like right-wing women in particular, those who think that anyone living differently to them must be unhappy and aimless and stupid and a whore. Like, it is spot on. It really is. So again, I applaud this book for being quite realistic, to be honest. It's like pretty spot on. The scene ends with Rena, the roommate, punching Natalie, and Natalie uses that as an excuse to get her own room on campus. After a few months, another student from a Christian group reaches out to Natalie to try and help her because she thinks that Natalie looks unwell, she's been isolating herself a lot, but in response, Natalie initially turns her down because it's just not really my thing, I said. This was, I thought, a much nicer thing to say than the truth. The girls in your group are dumb as rocks, and the idea of sharing spiritual communion with them would probably feel like getting intellectually stoned to death. See what I mean? It's just mean. So mean. But when the girl tells her that, you know, like, she's quite honest, she's like, you do look rough, I do think you need some help, I'm concerned about you. Natalie ends up crying, and she ends up going to the church group anyway, and she says, I sat with the dumb girls, I suffered their little sniffling moans and sighs of glory to God, and it was fine. She's just awful. She's so awful. And then she meets Caleb at one of these events, and the chapter ends. Back to the 1800s, and she learns that the eldest daughter is called Mary, like I already told you, but this is where she learns it. And she's shocked because Mary is the name she was going to give to the child that she was pregnant with before this whole time travel incident or whatever it is. Once again, Natalie decides to try and run away, only this time she gets caught by like an animal trap. I thought it was like a bear trap, but it turns out it's a lot smaller. It's like a ferret trap or a small mink trap. Like a little mini animal trap. Traps her leg anyway, pretty damn bad. Not enough to like break the bone, but it definitely slices through the skin and it's pretty awful. This era's Caleb, who like I say is considerably older than her Caleb, he gets called Old Caleb. That's how we differentiate. We have Caleb and Old Caleb. And then even though she's screaming for stitches and an ambulance, she has to deal with, 1800s medicine basically. Dodgy ointment from a jar, and her daughter stitching her up with what looks to be twine. Pretty damn painful. I guess natural remedies aren't always the best, are they? Chapter 8 cuts back to Natalie meeting Caleb at college at the church group, and we made eye contact. Then I sat down and we didn't look at each other again. The next meeting, he asked for my name. The meeting after that, he asked where I was from. The fourth meeting, did I want to get coffee sometime? That's how slowly our relationship moved at the beginning. Dating in my religion works that way. It feels like you're rolling very slowly down a long runway. Then, right as you think you're going to die for lack of momentum, you find yourself lifting up, 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 spinning wildly towards the sun in a sudden aerial ascent. Why does this feel like Bethany Beals writing this about meeting Dave? He asks her what she wants to do with her life, and she answers, she doesn't know, so she just picks something out of thin air, and she says, I paused. Where did I want to go? I want a farm with chickens. I want to live near my mother, I want a view of the mountains from my bedroom window, and I'd like to study theology. Part-time, of course, and only after the children are grown. That was pretty much exactly what every good Christian girl back home claimed to want, except for the theology bit. I added that part for myself. Caleb says he wants that life too, but he doesn't know how to get it. And then when he's like, maybe you can teach me, she says, teach? What did Caleb mean by teach? I never said I knew how to farm, yet here we were talking about living in the middle of nowhere, teaching each other how to, what? Rake dirt? Milk a cow? Cut a chicken's head off? The way Caleb was staring at me with that intense, pained look on his face, he clearly needed an answer. But an answer to what? Relax, I told myself. This is just a moment, it doesn't really matter. Here is what did matter. He was young and handsome and wealthy. Most important of all, he liked me. He really liked me. He said I was fascinating and funny and beautiful. No one had ever thought I was any of those things. On the third date, we discussed marriage. So yeah, a lot there. And it's interesting because, like, she does clearly like him a bit, and she is clearly attracted to him to some level. But also, yeah, the money's pretty important to her too. That's like a pretty high up there on the list. Again, isn't it funny how she's happy to like talk and complain about all the other girls at college who, you know, calling them shallow and not having any like real values, when she's here talking like this, just like deciding she wants a man because he's rich. It's wild. The hypocrisy, you know? When talking about her engagement ring and showing it to her mother, Natalie, my mother breathed, it's huge. I know, I said, matching her tone. I told Caleb it was way too big. She gave me a look of approval. That was the way women operated in my community. If you wanted to be a wealthy Christian woman and maintain good standing, you needed to publicly disavow your luxuries in order to maintain possession of them. It was a strange tug and pull I'd borne witness to my entire life. The only surprise was that it was finally happening to me. I was becoming the kind of woman other women were jealous of. Each time I looked at the ring, I felt an intoxicating combination of embarrassment and glee. It was a rich, decadent piece of jewellery. If I looked at it for too long, I started to feel sick. It was too much. It was a shameful display of wealth. I should give it back and demand we find something smaller. And also, I'd launch a holy war before I parted with it. As for Caleb, he insisted it was a perfect diamond for a woman like me. I was a flawless woman, he said. A timeless piece of decoration. And so there we get that. Not only is Natalie quite shallow, but so is Caleb too. He's objectifying and commodifying her as a woman. She's a timeless piece of decoration. A lot of objectification there. At this point, Natalie decides that she has seen the world now and I want no part in it. She says she doesn't want a job or a career. She just wants to be married to Caleb and have his babies. That is her only goal in life. Back in the 1800s timeline, and Natalie, with her injured leg now, is in so much pain. She just sits there uselessly as the two girl kids do all the work and make dinner, and she thinks cruelly to herself, perfect little homemakers, big fat bitches. Like, that's a horrible way to think about children. Like, let's just not talk about kids that way, yeah? What Christian kindness is on display here, So Mary, the eldest daughter, gets strict with her and tells her to sort herself out and that she's a grown woman and she needs to start acting like it, which is pretty fair, you know? Mary and the other kids take care of everything, and Natalie has the nerve to complain to herself, once again highlighting the differences between reality and the little fictional aesthetic trad life she was pretending to live before. And then we're seated at the table, me closest to the firelight and old Caleb at the far end, barely visible in the darkness. Mary is walking around ladling soup into our bowls. The spread for dinner looks nothing like the meals I've made for our Natural Dinner series. In the videos I showcased homemade cornbread, baked carrots, thin strips of pork with homemade cherry marmalade spooned over the plate in mouth-watering swirls. On the table before me is a single steaming crock of watery-looking soup with some vegetables and chunks of white flaky fish bobbing along the surface, and a small plate of biscuits. The meal looks, frankly, like poop. As she's falling asleep that night, Maeve, the littlest girl, tells her that this place is home, but they sometimes call it Yesteryear, hence the name of the book. Curious. The next chapter is another flashback, this time to Natalie and Caleb's wedding and wedding night, which goes about as well as you can expect for two inexperienced virgins. I'm not going into details here, you can read about it for yourself if you want, but I will say it's reminiscent of what we've heard from Girl Defined, from Paul and Morgan, and from plenty of other fundies for being awkward and surprising. Thankfully, it wasn't as abusive as Michael and Debbie Pearl's wedding night, but yeah, here we are. The rest of the chapter then is just about Natalie judging her old roommate Rena and making comparisons between them of, oh, I'm so great because I'm married to this rich guy and 6 months pregnant, whereas she's just had an AIDS scare and she got called a fat ugly whore, and now she's doing an internship, which means she's going to end up overworked and snorting a bunch of cocaine constantly. She just makes all these assumptions, it's bizarre. She even goes as far as to suggest that in time, during this time period of professional growth, Rena would also do her best to fall in love and get married, and if she managed that, then years later, when she finally got around to having kids, she would act utterly shocked when her doctor informed her she was a geriatric candidate and it would be an uphill battle to get pregnant. If she was lucky, and from what I'd seen, Rena had never been all that lucky, she'd only have to do 1 or 2 rounds of IVF, and there would only be a small handful of months where she found herself joking loudly about lighting money on fire while her husband jabbed at her fat bum with a needle. His mind started to wander past his miserable aging wife to the fun fun young assistant in his office, the one who was easy and light and funny, the one who had started to look subconsciously to him like the appropriate age for a woman to become pregnant. And when the time came, when Rena finally gave birth, when she finally looked around and realised she'd made it, she was at the top of the mountain, she had it all, the landscape would look like this. Her husband no longer wanted to touch her, her boss no longer wanted to promote her childless friends no longer wanted to spend time with her, and her friends with children no longer had time to see her, and Rena, sweet precious Rena, would complain about none of it. Not the disappearing husband, or the flailing career, or the crushing loneliness. Not a word of it to anyone, because she would technically be one of the lucky ones. A flush retirement account and 4 months maternity leave, in Jesus' name, amen. And in the world that Rena would soon inhabit, you don't get to complain about those kinds of problems, you don't get to complain about that privilege. You don't get to complain about privilege. It was clear Rena was dreading it, not just the internship, but the rest of her own life. As if she'd been shot through by some fairy tale curse. A lot of assumptions there. A lot of judgment. None of that even happened to Rena. Yeah. Clearly there's a lot of projection there of Natalie trying to feel better about her own life choices and her own decisions by judging someone else for things that she assumes she's going to do and want, and things that are going to happen to her that don't even end up happening. You know, it's not even based on reality. People like this really do live in their own little fantasy worlds, don't they? They dream up these horrific scenarios that they assume other people must be living in, and then they pity them for it. Like, they pity them for a life that they've imagined rather than the life they're actually living, and it's a lot. It's a lot. If only she had the brains or the courage to consider any other path forward beyond the one that feminism, that nasty witch, had offered her. Silly, stupid Rena had bitten the poison apple straight down the core. Standing there that day, she looked so miserable at the prospect of her own empowered future that I nearly laughed out loud. See what I mean? Like, she's making all this up, and two, she's just mean as hell. Absolutely mean. The euphoria of my victory was making my vision blur. I won! You stupid effing bitch! Sorry, Lord. I won! Natalie is such a well-written, hateable narrator. Like, seriously. Chapter 12 tells us the first experience of Natalie giving birth, how she'd wanted a home birth but ended up in hospital. It didn't help that I'd never really thought about giving birth in any practical sense, in the same way I'd never thought hard about the parts of my life I was predestined for: motherhood, marriage, the afterlife. Why worry over inevitability? All my life I'd understood and accepted that I was brought into this world for the explicit purpose of eventually bringing other lives into this world, like a never-ending baton pass, an infinite relay of God's glory. I'd assumed I would step into the role naturally, since the role itself was natural, was nature, but nothing felt natural about this. Again, this feels so much like Morgan's story of her first birth, and how, like, they didn't plan any specifics and it all went wrong and she nearly died, and ugh. Yeah, it's sad. I think this part of the book in particular does a really good job of showing how important a comprehensive education around things like pregnancy and childbirth are, because when you don't have them, you end up with experiences like this. Certainly no one had mentioned how ugly childbirth could be, how gruesome and messy. I'd known in some rough practical sense that my body would have to be split open for a child to leave it, but I hadn't remotely prepared for the bold terror of it. Hadn't known that my softest and most private patch of skin would rip a full inch. Hadn't known the delivery room would smell like iron from all the blood loss, not to mention literal human excrement. It's at this point as well that Natalie talks about the advice that her mother had actually given her. The only warning my mother had given me for this period of my life had been that Caleb might not find me attractive after the baby was born. It's only natural, she added. It'll pass. This was the latest iteration of a piece of advice she'd given my sister and me for years. Men are like babies. Their needs are not negotiable. And this is so gross. Again, this reminds me of, I've written 2 scripts today in response to Morgan and Cole's podcast, and one of them is about, like, the horrific expectations for women after they've given birth and how they need to get their body back and, like, all this horrible stuff, and a lot of body shaming in there. It's really horrible. And then the second one is, it has sections about how, like, you owe your husband sex and how you shouldn't be saying no to him because that's evil and blah, blah, blah. And it's just, yeah, I hear a lot of that in this book. Then we get a scene that I swear I could have read on Carissa Collins' blog, and it absolutely breaks my heart. So if you haven't seen it, a few years back I made a video called The Saga of Carissa Collins, where I went through, like, a lot of her old blogs and a lot of her content and looked at, like, how she's changed over the years and how she hasn't, and some pretty horrific stories. And sadly, Carissa wrote a hell of a lot about her issues with body image and how that manifested into fasting even while she was pregnant. And her obsessing over her weight during pregnancy, and again, very similar to the second Morgan podcast episode as well. And it's horrifying and heartbreaking to read. And this scene in the book felt very reminiscent of those real life moments for Carissa and Morgan. So again, it feels like Caro, the author, has taken a lot of inspiration from real life women here to create this fictional Natalie. My mother was staring at me now. "Stop looking at me like that," I snapped. "I'm perfectly aware of how disgusting I am. I gained 26 pounds throughout my pregnancy. 10 of them were now outside of me. Those 16 lingering pounds felt like a second suit of skin, itchy and ill-fitting." And it's interesting because one of the things that Carl says on that podcast with Morgan is it's really good to weigh yourself straight after you've given birth, because like that's the quickest you'll ever lose 10 pounds in your life. And it's like you know how awful that is, how dangerous that is to tell people, like, when you've given birth, that shouldn't be what you're thinking about. You shouldn't be counting the pounds. Like, you shouldn't be thinking about your body that quickly. Like, you've just put your body through so much trauma and stress. Give it time to heal before you start, like, counting things. But anyway, sorry, I'm rambling now. "You're going to be back to feeling like yourself in no time," my mother said. She sat down on the hospital bed and patted my blanketed legs. "You know what might make you feel better? What if you went on a little jog around the hospital? Get your endorphins up. You never were one to enjoy lying around." The nurse was looking at my mother now. She absolutely cannot go on a jog right now. It took 10 minutes to wait for the next nursing shift to change to take advantage of the commotion and to sneak down the hallway wearing nothing but a hospital gown and my mother's sneakers. It took another 15 minutes to jog/walk around the perimeter of the emergency room parking lot. By the time I closed the loop at the hospital entrance, it felt like I was experiencing the early stages of organ failure. My heart was throbbing wildly in my chest, my appendix screaming its threats to rupture, and with each step forward I could literally feel, the precious stretch of skin down there as it ripped open again. The doctor's stitches no match for my mother's voice in my head. "That a girl, Natalie. Get those endorphins up, up, up." Blood ran in slick rivers down my thighs. I collapsed into a nurse while I was walking back through the hospital entrance. And after all that, her mother just tells her she has to deal with it. And, "Oh, the baby's crying now, so come on, get on up. Look after your kid." It's barbaric. Absolutely barbaric. But this is so much of the pressure and stress that so many of these fundy women, and just women in general, and people who've given birth, what they have to deal with because of all these pressures on people to, like, get your body back looking this way and do this and be active. And it's like, no, you've just been through a massive trauma. Give your body time to rest and recover and heal itself. Wild. The lack of care is horrifying, but again, it's a realistic portrayal. Chapter 13 is back to the 1800s, where Natalie is once again getting no care or compassion. She also spends a good amount of time complaining about not having enough clothes, not having enough nice clothes, and they're too drab and depressing. Like, yeah, you think. Thing is though, when she goes outside she finds something crazy. A little piece of plastic, as though from a lapel mic, that's like buried in the dirt, and she's thinking, maybe this isn't actually the 1800s, maybe this is a film set, maybe this is reality TV, and she starts having all these ideas. So at this point I was like, what do we think is happening here? Because I have my little thriller head on, I'm like, oh, what is this? Crazy social experiment, prank show, crazy revenge plot, actual time travel, maybe this is like set in the future and it's like not the past. I had all these thoughts. I said I would be okay with any of these outcomes, although if it's something like a social experiment or a prank show, it'd be crazy to allow her to get so badly injured during it. And what about the ethics of using kids in this way? So I didn't think it was them. I also said, as long as it doesn't turn out to be it's all a dream, I'll be happy with whatever. And I will tell you now, it is not all a dream, so we're good. Back in the flashbacks, and Natalie is clearly having some sort of issues with postpartum depression, but no one takes them seriously. It felt like I was dead, waiting for the Lord to pull the spirit from my hardened body. My mother must have sensed the general direction of my hopelessness, because she kept saying an old Sunday school line to me every time she came upstairs to change a diaper, or bring me a meal, or help me with a feeding. Doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith, sweetheart. I didn't reply. Sleep, breastfeed, breastfeed, sleep, 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 breastfeed, cry, breastfeed, sleep, kill yourself, no, sorry, sleep. On a less serious note though, Natalie's sister at this point, who was younger than her, she's also had 2 babies with a guy called Bryce. She now had a 1-month-old in addition to her 14-month-old. 2 boys, Brandon and Brady. She thought the matching B names were cute. Privately, my mother had concerns about this strategy. If, God willing, Abigail had a family of 5 or 6 or 7, would she really have all the names start with B? Wouldn't we all grow tired of the sound? So I was like, shout out to the Duggars and the Collinses, right? And this is what Abigail does for her next few kids. They all have B names. It's very, very Duggars, very Carissa Collins. But in all seriousness though, her poor sister is going through it. She says, it's awful, isn't it? I said nothing. Didn't even let myself exhale for how surely a yes would slip out of my breath. Not the babies. The babies are perfect. She let out a quick, ragged gasp. I'm just so tired. And Bryce. Another pause. He always wants to have sex, and I'm just... And the boys are so... I think I might be pregnant again. Can you imagine? 3 babies in 3 years. I can't believe it. I never thought it would happen this fast. And this makes me so happy that I never will and likely never can have children, because that really does sound horrific, you know? The next part is really heartbreaking though. I've been thinking about it, you know, she whispered. Getting birth control. Bryce doesn't believe in it, but I heard you can go to the doctors and get it. Without them knowing, I mean. This was my breaking point. I sat up, startling her, and hissed. Birth control? Lying to your husband? These are sins, Abigail. And yes, I'm going to keep drawing these comparisons to real people, but this sounds so much to me like Paul and Morgan, because Morgan used to take birth control until Paul convinced her it was a sin and she stopped, and then she nearly died giving birth, and then he still wouldn't let her use birth control, and then they had another unexpected pregnancy which terrified her, and she was all like crying and whatever because she thought she was going to die from it, and I believe after that, especially with her current health problems that she still hasn't really got tested for, they were actually thinking about letting her go back on birth control for a while, but as of one of Morgan's latest Instagram posts, it turns out their only form of birth control at the minute is the pull-out method, which we all know is not effective and not a real form of birth control. It's not effective in preventing pregnancy at all, so she's very likely going to get pregnant from that, like, absolutely. So all I have to say at this point is, can we please stop telling people that birth control is a sin when their lives and their mental and physical health are at risk? It's wrong. Let people use it if they want to. At this point in the story, Natalie has been out of hospital with her baby for 10 days, and she's been staying at her mum's house, and Caleb comes to visit them for the first time. And I was like, what the hell? So he's not been parenting for the first 10 days of his kid's life. It's horrific, but also, again, accurate as hell, right? He brings her presents like a phone so she can call him when he's away, suggesting he's going to be absent a lot. He brings her a pair of new running shoes to double down on those insecurities she has about her body and her need to lose weight, apparently. And a baby carrier so she can take the baby running with her because she's not allowed any relief or time off to herself. Because babies is a woman's job, remember? But at this point, Natalie realised Caleb is like stupid, and she says, the full truth was that he wasn't anything smart. He was a nice, dumb, rich kid. And what did that make me? A fool. An embarrassment of a woman. At the most important moment in my life, I'd made a critical error of judgment. I'd mistaken a man's wealth for his intellect. Harsh but true. My husband was an idiot. Worse, there was absolutely nothing to be done about it. In the world that I came from, divorce was a German word that translated loosely to a lifetime of destitution and misery followed by an eternity in hell. You didn't leave your husband if he slapped you in the face, or had an affair, or set you up on a weekly allowance so sparse that you snapped at your children when they spilled a glass of milk. And you certainly didn't leave your husband if he was just some dumb, rich guy. There it was. I couldn't avoid it now. The dawning, prickly sensation that I knew my husband as well as I knew the elderly cashier who bagged groceries in my hometown. And this is what happens when you rush into marriage and don't allow people a way out of it. It ends in misery. This is not healthy for anyone involved. Back in the 1800s, and Natalie starts to think she must be part of a reality show, but just like we questioned, she asks, what kind of reality show would allow a man to slap a woman? What kind of people would stand idly by while she stepped into a steel trap and nearly chopped off her own foot? But then she starts to think, no, maybe this really could be a reality TV show. But if it is that, then her suddenly not being pregnant doesn't make sense. So at this point, I'm thinking definitely time travel, or maybe like memory issues, and she's just forgotten a big chunk of her life, something like that. Back in the flashback in like our time though, Natalie is trying more with parenting, and she also tries to convince Caleb to finally get a job, but he just doesn't want to. He's like, no, I'm living off daddy's money, this is fine. And she's like, no, you need a purpose, you need a job, you need to provide for your family. When she can't get through to him, she ends up complaining to her mum, who tells her to complain to his mum, and then his mum gets onto him. So it's all very pathetic. And basically they end up moving back to California to go and live with his parents for a while. And Natalie feels a little regretful that she dropped out of college and never finished her degree. But then she's like, no, this is what I'm meant to do. Be a wife and mother. I don't actually need a degree. Chapter 18 is just as sad as the rest of the book. There comes a point in every marriage when a woman realises that the man she married is a freak. This is inevitable. It cannot be avoided. The only real question in the matter is what type of freak your husband will be. Meaning, if you're lucky, you will find out your husband is preternaturally into vintage children's train sets, and you will not find out your husband pays high school cheerleaders for sex. That is the best we homemakers can hope for in this life. A man whose freakishness is not unspeakably violent or technically illegal, and therefore something we are able to beat. This is sad. This is so damn sad. If that's the best you can hope for, it's heartbreaking, isn't it? This is the part in the book, though, where Natalie realises that her husband has committed the worst fundy sin of all. No, not abusing children, that's forgivable, of course, just look at the Duggars. No, he's done the unthinkable, and he's, watched pornography. Shocking, I know. Terrible, disgusting. How could he? Yes, porn. This I hadn't told my mother. One afternoon, I walked into our bedroom to find Caleb's laptop open at his desk. I glanced over to our bathroom door and saw it firmly shut tight, a band of yellow light by the floor. I walked over to his desk, hoping to find the browser open to a job listing. Instead, I found a grotesque still of a couple, naked and frozen mid-thrust. Before my brain short-circuited, I noted the long line of tabs open at the top of the browser. Husband and wife, real couple, F passionately for 1 whole hour, intense kissing leads to squirting orgasm, amateur couple have hot intimate F session, lots of P-word licking. Then I stepped forward and slammed the laptop screen shut. My wagon was hitched to a sex pervert. It's actually quite wholesome as things go, isn't it? Anyway, Natalie and Caleb's parents conspired to try and get him a job, but it's tough because, as Natalie says, "I wish there was a job for playing with babies," Caleb whispered. "I'd be great at that." I didn't say anything. The panic I'd felt earlier in the kitchen was now gone, replaced by a dull, sweet throbbing in my chest. He was good at playing with babies. He never grew bored or irritated with Clementine. He found her endlessly entertaining. In fact, that was the problem, wasn't it? He had no desire to do anything else. My husband wanted too little from his life, and me, I wanted too much. Suddenly it was so obvious. Caleb should have been born a woman, and I should have been born a man. A sad sickness turned my stomach. We were equally broken in that way. And it's so sad, isn't it? Like, you're not broken. This doesn't mean you should have been born a different sex or gender. Like, it just means you have different strengths, and that's okay. This is proof of why gender roles are so outdated and unnecessary, isn't it? It doesn't mean you're broken or wrong. It just means you fit a different role, and these, traditional gender roles don't work for you. I feel like this dynamic is something we see in a lot of fundy couples too, and it's something they don't want to admit to. Like, look at Bethany and her husband Dave. They're who spring to mind immediately. They keep going on about how, the woman needs to submit to the man, and the man needs to be the big, strong provider, and blah, blah, blah. But Bethany's the one with, the mind of an entrepreneur who's, really interested in business and working and that sort of thing. Whereas Dave seems much more, kind of creative and laid back and happy to just sort of, be home with the kids and do his own little projects and stuff. They don't fit into traditional gender roles, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they keep trying to force themselves into it because that's what they've grown up with. And that's what we see here with Natalie and Caleb, and it's sad. But then Natalie has this revelation, or delusion, however you want to frame it. Again, it's something we've seen plenty of times before from other fundies, and it's really well represented here. Marrying Caleb had not been a mistake or an act of ignorance. No, quite the contrary. It had been the beginning of a divine mission. We were put on this earth to teach each other how to be, to give each other purpose. I would help Caleb become a better man, and he would help me become a better woman. Through my example, Caleb would grow stronger, more ambitious, and through his example, I'd grow softer, more loving with our children. Like a balancing of liquids, he would take and I would give until we met each other in the middle. It would be the job of a lifetime for both of us. We were a match made in heaven. I could see it now. And we all know, of course, this doesn't happen. This is not how things work. It's not going to end well, is it? No. Back in the 1800s, and Natalie has tried to escape again, and she has now been tied by her ankles with fabric ropes to keep her in the kitchen. This is the first bit to me that felt a little bit unrealistic and sensational, but I was like, okay, this is fine, let's carry on. Caleb had warned her at this point, if you cause another problem, if you try and leave this ranch, or even worse, try and take a child with you, I'll tie you up by the horse and see how you do overnight, you exhausting wretch of a woman. And at this point I was like, you know what, actually, this doesn't seem that far-fetched for, like, if this is the 1800s. Because back then, you know, there is a history of, in the UK, men being known to sell their wives when they got sick of them, or they would pay people to have their wives, like, dunked in the local river if they embarrassed them, or flirted with another man, or did something wrong. So, like, yeah, this doesn't seem that far-fetched, I guess, in reality. This is followed by a scene of Natalie being shocked that her daughter has to churn butter completely by hand instead of using an electric mixer. Like, you get the point at this point. There's lots of comparisons between Natalie's old life and this life. It's a little, I don't want to say repetitive, but there's a lot of examples. It's nice to see such attention to detail. Back in the present day flashbacks, Caleb has decided he wants to be a nursery teacher, and Natalie doesn't like this and she panics. A pit formed in my stomach. He would be good at it. He'd be incredible. He'd probably love spending all day with children, teaching them all the benign bits of information about the world that any idiot adult could master. Blue is a primary colour. Fish have gills. If he started this job, he would want to do it for the rest of his life, and the dream of a respectable life would be over. We would be consigned to life as a kindergarten family. Dimly, I registered there was some poetic justice to the phrase. We were a couple with a diagnosis so serious it bordered on medical. Failure to launch. She's so shallow, but this is how I imagine women like Erica Kirk are, you know, and Candace Owens, Abby Shapiro. I feel like they are like this with their husbands behind the scenes. Just a vibe I get, you know? So Natalie starts to try and put him off by spouting right-wing conspiracies, and this sends him down a rabbit hole where he becomes like a proper conspiracy theorist, and he's a part of the whole manosphere online, and it just gets more and more extreme as the book goes on. She says, "Do you even know what they teach children in school, Caleb?" "What?" "They teach them that being Christian is a terrible thing, that gender is a construct, that marriage is some destructive force. Do you want that for our kids?" "Of course not," Caleb said. He frowned. "Do they really teach that these days?" I nodded somberly. "They teach little white children to feel guilty about the fact that our country used to have slaves. My public school hadn't taught this, but I'd heard from other schools that had. Or rather, my mother had heard about it from another woman at a church bake sale, who had heard about it from her sister's best friend, who was a principal at an afflicted middle school in California, or Maryland, or Canada. My mother, or the woman, or her sister, could never quite remember where. But that ended centuries ago. It doesn't matter. They don't care about facts." Which, yeah, is just typical right-wing talking points. We've heard it from so many people, Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, they always go on about this stuff. And call me crazy, but I do think people should generally be ashamed that their country had slaves and was part of the slave trade. I think understanding that that is wrong and feeling guilt and shame for it is a part of making sure it never happens again. So in order to deter him from the nursery teacher idea, she decides to go ahead with the farm idea because she thinks it will make Caleb a man. So she starts planning and she buys an old cattle ranch for way over market value, and she starts plotting with his dad, Doug. Doug's office was a fever dream of 1950s manhood. The walls were dotted with diplomas and pictures with famous people. There were 2 leather chairs positioned in front of a fireplace with a cigar box sitting between them, and he, at this moment, was sitting behind a mahogany desk so large and ornate that it must have taken 3 old men to get it in here. I was only vaguely aware of Doug's politics to begin with. God, family, and beer. A traditional values man. This is exactly the kind of person I dislike and who I would genuinely feel very unsafe around, and this is where I start to get like the Donald Trump comparisons, you know? So he agrees to give Natalie and Caleb a small loan of $5 million. See what I mean about the Donald Trump thing? And he asks her for something in return, and at first she thinks he's going to ask for sex, like her father-in-law. Ew. But he doesn't. Well, actually, what's even more ew than that is her response. Doug was a real man, effortlessly masculine. He didn't ask for power, or respect, or submission. He demanded it. He was the kind of man to climb up a mountain of dead bodies in the name of touching the sky. I hated him. I wanted him dead. And also, I sometimes imagined what it would feel like for a man like that to have me. Biblically, I mean. Which is another way of saying, if Doug had asked me what I thought he was going to ask me, I might have given it to him. I might have even liked it. Might have even asked, when everything was said and done, for more. Ew. But again, does anyone feel like this feels a little bit like how you imagine Erica Kirk and Donald Trump to be? Just saying, just my opinion. Anyway, thankfully he doesn't ask her for that. He just says he wants her to have more babies with Caleb. That's all he asks in return. And she's like, yeah, sure, cool. Problem is, at this point, Natalie and Caleb don't really have a sex life. She's been complaining that he's not exactly into it, if you know what I mean. He can't really get an erection. And yet she still agrees to this because what other choice does she have? She needs that $5 million. So when she gets home from the meeting, she finds that Caleb has not been doing his parenting duties like he said he would, and he hasn't woken the babies up in time, so now their whole sleep schedule is off. Instead, he's been busy watching conspiracy theories about how evil teachers are vaccinating babies without parents' consent, and other evil schools are making children feel worthless on purpose. And do you know, Natalie, why I've been struggling so much lately? Why I can't seem to find my purpose? It's not my fault, actually. It's the people in charge of this country who are trying to feminize men. So because of all this, he agrees to live on the farm with Natalie and have more babies and to homeschool, because he wants to keep them away from the paedophiles in the school system. But he'll only do it if instead of a cattle farm, which might actually be profitable, they only grow organic vegetables. In the 1800s, Natalie is woken and she doesn't feel as scared this time. I'm pretty sure she's now certain that it's some sort of reality TV program and a fake set, because I look around at the kitchen and feel a sudden rush of amazement. This is incredible. A feat of engineering. It truly feels like I'm living in the pioneer days. And I mean, it's no wonder that her brain immediately goes to reality TV, because one, she's an influencer, and two, her mother always gave her the advice to pretend you're being watched when you're doing something difficult, so that it'll make you smile and like get through it and pretend to enjoy it. So thematically, this is all making sense. I love that. Natalie gets her first experience of having to wash in freezing cold water outdoors, and she says it feels like waking up. So she does actually quite like it. She's like, it's horrible, but actually this isn't so bad. You know, I see the good points to this. Meanwhile, Mary talks about how they'll have to reuse the bathing water for laundry and then for mopping to make the most of it. So it's not like just today where you can just turn on a tap and get clean water straight away. Natalie at this point keeps fluctuating between feeling happy and content and feeling miserable and confused. She's very up and down. Although when she looks up at the sky, she thinks she sees a chemtrail up there. So apparently Caleb got obsessed with them when they moved to the farm because he's super into his conspiracies, remember? However, we know in reality that those are just trails of condensation left by aeroplane engines. They're nothing bad, they're not chemicals or whatever. But this begs the question, if this really is the 1800s and it's time travel, why would there be a chemtrail? So at this point, I'm leaning towards the amnesia theory. Think like, people say it's a rom-com, but really it's a horror film. 50 First Dates. You know, she wakes up every day and like she has no memory of the days before, and she still thinks it's like oh my god. At the end of the film where she wakes up pregnant, horror film. That's what I was feeling was happening here at this point. But then you have to ask, like, well, if it's the future, then why is everything all backward? Anyway, I had a lot of questions. I was excited to see where this went. Chapter 26 is another flashback, and we get the reveal that in the present day, Natalie and Caleb had called their ranch Yesteryear, which makes it all the more intriguing that that's what 1800s Maeve called the ranch too. So that was like helping me with my amnesia theory, or maybe time travel theory, and we'll see. I was loving the intrigue and the mystery so far. I also love that this is just like a fundy character study as well, but the added layer of this puzzle and this kind of potential time travel element, the thriller lover in me loved it. I found this really enjoyable. I love this book. The chapter follows Natalie's first 7 social media posts over a 3-year period. They were slow and basic before she really knew what she was doing, before she really knew she wanted to be an influencer or anything like that. There's a lot of reasonable enough stuff during this time, and some absolutely abhorrent stuff, like a complete lack of basic care for her children's health, for example. During our inspection of the farm, we learned about an infestation of black mold that had taken over the bathroom in the house. I thought of that poor old man who had been unknowingly breathing in the spores, and his son with the cancer. Very sad. Then I realised that dealing with the mold meant more time at Doug and Amelia's house, so I said, can't we just take our chances? Caleb looked at me. Clementine could develop asthma. Plenty of people have asthma and go on to live a perfectly full life. Caleb didn't buy that, so we waited while the house was chemically treated, and they kept finding more mold. So she was perfectly fine with her, young baby breathing in black mold spores. This selfishness is crazy. Again, reminds me of Carissa Collins and her lack of care for her kids. Like, she wrote those posts about how one of her babies was so ill they couldn't hold their own head up, like they couldn't lift their head up. And so she was like, well, I could take them to the hospital. Nah, we'll go to the basketball game first, and then I'll take them. And it turns out the baby had like an untreated UTI and got really bad sepsis and nearly died. And it's like, what the hell? So I'm getting Carissa Collins vibes from this. Although I do think with Carissa Collins, the reality was worse than the fiction in this book. So, yeah. So on the plus side, Caleb starts to get more excited and ambitious about farming, and he starts to actually take time to learn stuff, which is new for him. He hasn't really done that before. Then again, they're also pretty irresponsible at first and make a lot of mistakes. They end up getting a bunch of animals that they don't have the ability to look after or the qualifications to properly look after, which leads to the animals suffering and dying unnecessarily. I feel like this is less of a critique of fundies and more of a critique on influences in general and this culture of like needing instant gratification, but at the same time this abuse of animals is something we have seen from fundy influences like Carissa Collins before when she nearly poisoned her dog and wouldn't take it to the vet. Meanwhile, there's a whole subplot of the father-in-law running for Senate and trying to run for president again, and his wife not coping with it and developing some sort of drug addiction and then passing out at a fundraising event. The family have their priorities all screwed up because they make the paramedics stop to sign an NDA before they're allowed in to treat her, which is ridiculous. There is so much that could be said about this, but it's like with the rest of this book, there's so much to talk about. I'm not going to go into every little bit in detail. At this point, Natalie and Caleb's sex life is basically non-existent, so she gets herself pregnant by making him finish in a bowl and then using a turkey baster to, basically inseminate herself. That's how she gets pregnant with baby number 2 and the other babies. I was very interested to see where they went with this Caleb storyline and like what his issue is. It's never quite fully explained. We get kind of like it's addressed, but not as much as I would like. This is one of my critiques of the book. I wish this sexual dysfunction had been explored a little bit more. I do feel like this sort of thing is very common in fundy marriages, though, from what I've seen on like Bethany Beale's sex course videos and the guests on there. A lot of people seem to have these kinds of sexual dysfunction issues in their marriage. So I'm glad it was included in the book at all, but I do wish it had been explored in a little bit more detail. Back in the past, and Natalie says she has good days and bad days, but mostly she seems miserable, to be honest. And so I move through the hours as the best possible version of myself, the most obedient wife, the most loving mother. When I bring the pan to the table and set it down proudly, showcasing my perfectly scrambled eggs, no one is impressed. No one even says thank you. But I don't mind. Of course I don't mind. A good wife never minds. Instead, I think with the blunt cerebral force of a spaceship hurtling through the atmosphere, how lucky am I? This life. Such a blessing. On good days, I amaze myself at my own bravery. I take on each new chore and assignment with the obedient pluck of a picture book pioneer woman. Ironing and sewing and mopping and wood tending and udder cleaning and potato peeling. La-di-da, what a life. I ignore the fact that our meals are tasteless and beige and usually consist of 2 or fewer food groups. I ignore about half of the thoughts that pop into my head. Instead, I focus on being a tender mother and a cheerful wife. I never let them see me cry, especially not Maeve. On bad days, my thoughts swirl in eddies of relentless panic. I have to leave. I cannot leave. I think he might kill me. I think I might kill him. I know someone is watching. I know no one is watching. I'm worried I'll die here. I cannot die here. I think I would rather be dead. You know, all those people who complain about no-fault divorce being an issue and women being able to instigate divorce all being an issue, I think they need to realise that this is what life was like for women before that was an option, when they couldn't get divorced. This is what life is still like for a lot of women who don't have divorce as an option. It's not romantic and sweet and cute. It doesn't make marriages last all happy and lovey and romantic. It's controlling and it's scary and it puts people in misery and in danger. Back in the present day in the flashbacks, Natalie has just had her second child when her sister and mum come to visit. Her sister Abigail is currently 29 and has 5 kids and is pregnant with another one when she announces she is going to be leaving her husband because she is miserable. Natalie's response is just as awful as you would expect. I shook my head. But how can you afford a lawyer? Abigail frowned. That's your first question? You and Bryce have no money. How can you afford to divorce him? I took out a loan, if you really want to know. But how did you qualify for a loan? I tell you I'm getting a divorce and all you care about is the money. How about, I'm sorry to hear this, Abigail. How about, why are you getting divorced, Abigail? I rolled my eyes. I know why you're getting divorced. And why am I getting divorced, Natalie, if you know so much? Because your husband is mean and dumb and drinks too much. He probably calls you names in front of the children. He probably hits you sometimes. I paused, waiting for Abigail to confirm or deny this hypothesis, but she remained silent, her expression so still, so fathomless in its depth, that it looked like a great body of water at night. And so I went on, ignoring the terrifying stillness of my sister's face, ignoring too the horrified expression on my mother's. Lord save us all. He's lazy too. He's never done anything with that shop. That man is and has always been a loser, but now it's becoming harder for you to bear. So now you, my poor sister, have somehow gotten into your head that you'll be better off without him. And I'm sorry, Abigail, but you will not. So this is projection, right? She is absolutely projecting her own insecurities and feelings about her loser of a husband onto Abigail. I think this is obvious. And also, how horrible is that? Like, I can't imagine having this little sympathy for my sister. Crazy. She goes on and says, "You'll be a single mother of 5 living on food stamps," I snapped. "That is what you'll be. You don't even have a job history, Abigail. My God, you'd be lucky if they hired you to bag groceries with teenagers in town." And this is one of the reasons why I always encourage people, especially women, to never be 100% financially reliant on someone else, because you never know when you're going to end up on your own and need to be on your own and need to support yourself, you know? But Natalie, rather than offering any support or help, just gets crueler and crueler. Like, she's living with a millionaire husband. Like, you'd think she could help out her sister a little bit, but no, she's just mean. My fury circled back around, and does anyone else think she's angry because she's jealous? Just a thought. My fury circled back around, and it suddenly felt like I was eating myself alive. Have you thought about where you'll live? You can move in with Mother for a while, but not forever. And then what? You've never lived on your own before, Abigail. Do you know what it takes to apply for an apartment? Do you even know what a credit score is? Stop it, Abigail whispered. Please, Natalie, stop it. I couldn't have stopped if I wanted to, and I didn't want to. I was angrier than I'd ever been in my life. I felt sick with it. Do you honestly think the rules don't apply to you? That you can just waltz away from all your responsibilities completely unscathed? Of course I don't. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I... Do you think Bryce won't file for custody? Of course he will. He'll be remarried within the year, and then he and his new bride will fight for the children just to spite you. He'll say you're a cruel mother, a drunk, and the judge will agree with him, and before long, you'll be seeing your children every other Saturday. They won't even know you. So of course, like I mentioned before, there's massive projection here from Natalie, and we see why. She, at this point, thinks back to her agreement with Doug and the prenuptial agreement she signed with Caleb, and it turns out that only Caleb's name is on the ranch, so despite all the work and organisation that Natalie put into it and getting it up and running and stuff, if she ever wanted to leave Caleb, because of all this, she would get literally nothing. And because she's from a family without money and Caleb's from a family of literal millionaires, yeah, he'd probably get custody of the kids, he'd get everything, she'd be left with nothing. So a lot of what she's worrying about for Abigail here and what she's angry about is clearly projection, because that's what would happen in her own life. And the thing is, like, it's crazy that, like, this fear of ending up with nothing seems worse, like, money-wise, is worse than, like, living a miserable, unhappy marriage. It's a lot. The chapter ends with her saying, "An impossible thing to imagine. What might happen if my husband ever paused and thought about the governing law of his own starry universe? His wife might as well have been a farm dog for all the rights she had. Even the sweetest, stupidest man can grow cruel and cunning when he learns a thing like that." Which is terrifying, right? But no, in the minds of these fundy women, feminism is the real evil in this world. Not this. Back in the past, and Natalie realises her true role if she is an 1800s woman. Everyone has a role on this farm. Old Caleb tends to the fields, and Noah tends to the horses, and Abel tends to his father, and Mary tends to the kitchen and to Maeve, and Maeve tends to the chickens, and me? A few nights ago I might have said my role is to take care of the laundry. That is of course not correct. The laundry is an addendum, a footnote, a mid-afternoon side quest for a woman with too much time on her hands. This right here is my true role. To spread my legs when my husband demands, to have as many children as I can until my legs give out beneath me, and to feel nothing but gratitude on the hour of my death, to smile when the spirit hemorrhages out of me. Ha! It really is funny to think how I all but begged Caleb in our early years of marriage to become the kind of man who is standing before me now, the opposite of a kindergarten teacher, a farmer, a cowboy, a patriarch, a man without a single soft edge. I craved it, I prayed for it, And what did the Lord do? He listened. He gave me what I wanted. He gave me a man. For the husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, and is himself its saviour. A voice in my head echoing softly. America hates angry women. The Lord hates angry women. You hate angry women. Do not be an angry woman. Except I am angry. I am very, very angry. So angry that I can't keep myself from saying, "What do you want from me?" "I want you to behave like a mother and a wife," old Caleb snaps, and suddenly I realise he's angry too. As angry as I am. It's a terrifying, thrilling realisation. You could strike a match through the air between us and watch it flame. Then there's an absolutely horrifying scene where consent is dubious, but it absolutely seems like Caleb rapes her. And this theme of dubious consent is something that we see throughout the book, and of Natalie not really understanding what it means to consent or not. And this is something we'll talk about and discuss in more detail later in the book, but just bear this in mind right now. She can't decide whether she actually wants this or not, because on the one hand, he kind of looks like Caleb, he kind of looks like her husband, but he doesn't look like her husband, and she's not sure what she actually wants, and she tries to rationalise this, as many fundy women do, by saying, though of course it can't be rape what's happening here, there's no such thing as a husband raping a wife, which of course we all know to not be true, but it's a thing that a lot of fundy women think. It's a thing that Morgan has recently spoken about in her podcast, which is something that I've been writing a script for today. And this scene is further complicated by the fact that even though it hurts at first, she does end up orgasming from it for what she believes is the first time in her life. And she ends the scene by saying, "I said yes." So it's a scene that's tough to read, and it's one that's complex and with nuance, that's confusing for her as a character, it's confusing for us as a reader. Is it rape? Is it not? The consent is incredibly dubious. She feels like it can't be because they're married, but then again, that's not how consent works. But then at the end she did say yes, so maybe she was giving consent. It's complicated. Like I say, this pattern of Natalie not quite understanding what it means to consent and what consent is and isn't is something we see throughout the book, and it's something that comes back at the end of the book, and we'll discuss it in more detail then. Afterwards, in the night, she decides that this whole situation must actually be real and that it's just God testing her. Doubt your doubts before you doubt your faith, sweetheart. Sometimes the most obvious truths of our world are the ones that get buried most easily. Obviously, the Lord has put me here, on this homestead, with this family, and like all the things he does, he brought me here with intention, with a plan. So much of my life was dedicated to broadcasting a vision of nostalgia, a better, more beautiful version of America, a celebration of the days of yore. Now the Lord wants me to feel the truth of my own message. He wants me to learn and listen and improve and submit, and, well, I'm not exactly sure what the end goal is, but that's fine. He'll tell me when he's ready. Mostly though, she just hopes she doesn't get pregnant in this world, which is completely understandable. Back in the present, and Natalie is starting to worry about money and getting cut off from Doug and his $5 million loan, which is slowly pretty much run out at this point. Meanwhile, they've hired, like I mentioned earlier, Mexican workers on the farm, and Natalie has been secretly telling them to use pesticides on the crops, but Caleb doesn't know this, so he's been at these farmers markets selling this veg as organic, which it's not, obviously, so that's illegal, and it can come with some very, very big fines if they're caught out. Natalie ends up being caught out by an old friend who's seen a barrel of pesticides in the background of one of her Instagram posts and been like, "Whoa, this is illegal, tell her she needs to stop." Instead of Natalie accepting the blame for any of this, she ends up making racist comments about the Mexican employees and even goes as far as to say, "Doug was right, what a border problem we had." Like it's your employees' fault for doing what you told them to. It's disgusting. After feeling like a massive failure, because let's be real, she is, she spends ages taking hundreds of photos of herself and her family, completely misrepresenting their situation online, making them all, in her opinion, look happier and healthier than they actually are. She says, "I wrote a caption. Sometimes I can't believe this is my actual honest-to-God life. And then I press post. It was the most important day of my life. The day I stopped working on my husband, my farm, my family, and returned to work an old beloved project. Myself. I walked back inside to make dinner for my family. After dinner, I knocked myself up again." And once again, I think this is a really accurate portrayal of family vloggers and influencers. It's scary, but it's realistic. This is the kind of behaviour we saw time and time again from people like Ruby Frankie. This book is a perfect little time capsule of the world we're currently living in and what some people, particularly in America, and some people who are influencers and family vloggers are like, and I think it's really great. Later, Natalie decides to sign up for a social media marketing course. She pays $1,500 for 6 one-hour Zoom lessons, which are run by a woman with just 50,000 online followers, who is promising to teach them how to make 6 figures a month on Instagram. Wild. I love the inclusion of scammy courses like this, because this is something that many fundie wives turn to for income. Bethany Beal, Morgan from Paul and Morgan, Solia Sario, just to name a few. The descriptions of the course are super revealing. In the first Zoom meeting, I expected to see a computer screen filled with women like the ones I'd gone to college with, smart, savvy, and violently progressive. Instead, the Zoom opened to reveal a gallery of women who looked like me. This was the first time I realised that the business of influence was not a secular calling. Nearly everyone had a cross necklace glistening on their chest, except one curly-haired woman from New Jersey, Rachel Weissman, who looked increasingly distressed in the opening minutes of the call until she finally turned her video off. We prayed at the opening and closing of each meeting. Yeah, because the only people who kind of fall for these scammy courses are the ones, and they pay these extortionate amounts for it, are the ones who are uneducated and don't know any better and are often guilted into doing these things because of their religion or background or circumstance. They're told, as a woman of God, you can't get a job and you can't do this, but this is how you can provide for your family. But it's okay, it's just like a little hobby on the side. You're still a mother and a wife first, and they kind of prey on these people and their vulnerabilities. It reminds me a lot of, do you remember Bethany Beal's She Works Smart course that she did, which was to teach women how to make money by selling courses online? She made a course to teach people how to sell courses, and she sold it for nearly $2,000. Crazy. She didn't get many sales, but she did get a few. I never took that course because I was not given her that much money. I do not have that much disposable income, but I did pay for her cheaper sex courses, and then I used those videos to raise a bit of money for charity, so some good came out of it. And I spent some money out of my own pocket. The same amount I spent on the courses, I gave that to charity as well, just to kind of alleviate a little bit of the guilt from giving her any money, to be honest. But I want to review those courses for people and kind of correct the misinformation and educate people a little bit. And what I found is, by looking at those courses, the similarities between Bethany's courses and the one in this book, there's a lot there, a lot of similarities. I'm so tired, I don't know what I'm saying anymore. It's 3 a.m. at this point, I'm very sleepy. According to Tammy, the most powerful force on the planet was the power of the divine Christian feminine. Trademark pending. That is like almost word for word out of Bethany's course. It's brilliant. We are limitless resources, the original Energizer Bunnies. All we need to do to achieve our wildest dreams was to channel our own infinite store of energy. If you are your true, authentic self, then sales will happen effortlessly, she said confidently while she clicked through a clearly homemade PowerPoint presentation. The slides sped quickly along and seemed to only loosely connect to what Tammy was saying. A stock picture of a blonde woman twirling in a field of flowers, a screenshot of a bank account with a balance of $80,000. A cartoon pyramid rendering of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, with a frowny-faced lady stick figure standing at the bottom. Okay, fine, maybe this is a bit more effort than Bethany ever put into her courses. She'd never make a PowerPoint presentation. I could practically feel the collective psychic weight of 100 relatively gullible women trying to hold so many contradicting truths in their brain at one time. Everything they had to succeed was already inside them, but they also needed to pay this woman in order to succeed. And a truly successful social media sales cycle should happen effortlessly. It should happen in our sleep. Yet we needed to start reclaiming some of our own time from our families so that we could commit ourselves to the effort. And the point of this course was to remind women to sink further into their own divine Christian feminine, and also it was time to develop some hard masculine skills, ladies. It was time to learn some maths. And most of the course, like many of these fundie courses, seems like fluff and nonsense rather than anything actually practical. I resisted typing my own questions into the chat. When are we going to learn about hashtags? Can someone explain the analytics dashboard on Instagram to me? Why do some of my photos get hundreds of likes and only one comment? Why do my cheeks itch when I haven't checked my phone in the last hour? Why are you better than me at this, Tammy Lane? Why am I here? Although, like I say, there does seem to be more in this course than there is in people like Bethany Beal's courses. So one of the things that they do that like Bethany never really did was after the lectures they break into these smaller groups and they give each other feedback on like their social media accounts and stuff. Except partway through they all realise that they're actually in competition with each other because they're all trying to do the same thing. So rather than like being peers helping each other out, they all kind of like feel really competitive, which is a bit sad, isn't it? But what's interesting is that most of the conversations they do have to kind of help each other are about how to look authentic online. Not to be authentic, but how to look authentic. Again, it's all very fake. I like the caption, Robin said. I just can't really put my finger on it. There's something kind of off. It's the smile, Ashley Ann said. That's it, Robin exclaimed. It's the smile. You don't actually look happy. You look like you're grimacing. 15 heads nodded in unison. That's just my smile, though. That's just how I smile. Here's the thing, Natalie. Cassidy gave me a cloying wince. I think what Ashley Ann is trying to say here is that it looks like you're pretending. I laughed again, although it sounded more like a cough. Isn't everyone? Ashley Ann rolled her eyes. Well, yeah, sort of, but it's not supposed to be so obvious. She looked at Cassidy for approval. Right? Cassidy nodded gravely. Emotions need to come across as totally authentic. Why don't you practice smiling in a mirror? It sounds silly, but it works. You have no clue how you look to others. And scarily, she begins to do this and pass it on to her kids as well, which is the most terrifying thing. I positioned her in front of me so that we were looking at each other in the mirror. For the millionth time, I found myself startled at how similar we looked down to the scowl. A little minnow of irritation swam through me. You have no clue how you look to others. You're a big girl now, Clementine. You need to learn how to smile. And this is how you get these cycles of abuse and it passing on to future generations. And your insecurities being passed down to your children. It's all very scary, isn't it? Meanwhile, Natalie finally gets her big break because Caleb has got super into his manosphere spaces online, and he tells some host of a right-wing online show about Natalie on a forum, and so him on his big show with tens of millions of viewers, he promotes her account by saying, "This is the kind of woman who is going to get our country back on track. None of that city woman, equality of the sexes bull poop. No, this is a wholesome, traditional, Aryan wife." He clicked through my Instagram pictures, creating a flipbook effect of me smiling all over this farm. Me in front of the barn, me in front of a cake mixer, me sitting on the front porch, caressing my bump. Man, if more families in America acted like this family, think about it. Celebrating nuclear families instead of denigrating them. Cherishing the separate and equally valuable roles of man and wife instead of constantly challenging them. Eating local, working the land, spreading good Christian values. The bearded man laughed heartily. I gotta say, I'm sold. What every man needs to do his job is a wife who can do her job. This right here, this Natalie Heller Mills, this is a wife who does her job. I mean, look at her, baking her own bread, milking her own cows, keeping their children healthy and safe and nurtured. I refreshed my account again. 15,000 followers. Look how hard this woman works. Look at how hard this woman works. Look how exhausted and beautiful she is. This, my friends, is the true American dream. Not that hamster wheel nightmare out in the cities. Don't let the media fool you. So this is clearly like a kind of Ben Shapiro, Tucker Carlson, Steven Crowder type, right-wing, Christian, racist, sexist, all about America first and all that nonsense, That kind of type of man, clearly. And there's definitely a commentary here about how in that space, the thing a woman needs to succeed is to be uplifted by a man. But even what he says about her to promote her isn't even the truth. He's presenting this false idea of her. As Caleb refreshed, 22, and refreshed again, 24, and refreshed again, 28,000 followers, I was just beginning to process what that man had said. Exhausted and beautiful. Did I look exhausted? And why was that a good thing? And had he said I bake all our bread from scratch? I could count on one hand the number of times I'd done so in my life. The picture I'd shared on my account of a sourdough loaf had been a loaf I'd picked up at the store. He was talking now about my kitchen, saying I didn't use microwaves because they were radioactive and caused cancer. I thought of the microwave in our pantry, ugly, hidden from view, and said quietly, I think there might have been a mistake here. But of course, all this attention also comes with a lot of criticism. Over the next 24 hours, I would gain over 300,000 followers. I was so stunned by that number, it took me quite a bit longer to realise how many of them were angry. This crap is so fake. Lol, this woman looks miserable. Religious cult alert, ding ding ding. This is not real life. Over coffee the next day, Caleb and I scrolled through the comments silently. Wow, he finally said. That's a lot of angry women. Which is interesting because, yeah, while some of the comments might seem a little bit mean, these ones here, they're also right, She is miserable. This is fake. This is not her real life. What follows is a lot of online growth, but also a lot of critical comments. And when she gets these, Natalie likes to look through their profiles and get all judgy about them and their lives. She also gets an offer at this point from her old college roommate who is doing an internship at a news company. Rena, who we keep coming back to. And she asks Natalie if she'll do an interview with her, but Natalie's like, no, just ignores her. And Natalie's like, ha ha, Rena's still an intern. I've got all this big following now. I'm so much better than her. And the comparisons start again. Back in seemingly the 1800s, things have been plodding along. Something is bothering Mary, the eldest daughter, and she seems off for some reason, but we don't quite find out what this is yet. The eldest boy has just turned 18 and is now a man. So Caleb takes him off into the woods one day, and when he comes back he's like, oh my god, but he won't say where he's been or what he's been doing or anything like that. Back in the present day flashbacks, and Natalie gets recognised at the grocery shop by a fan, only to be caught out because she's left her 6-month-old kid alone, locked in the car while she went to do the shopping, which we all know can be incredibly dangerous. You do not leave kids unattended in cars, not dogs either, none of that. On another occasion, she forgets to feed her children until 9 p.m. that night because she's busy filming content. And Caleb's mad at her, being like, oh my god, how could you forget the kids? But it's like, where were you? You're a parent too. You forgot your kids as well. It shouldn't all be her job. And this is when Natalie decides that she needs a nanny. But Caleb is like, our children don't need a nanny. He replied immediately, they need a mother. Or maybe you could just step up and be a parent too. Maybe they also need a father, But eventually he agrees to not get a nanny, but instead get a full-time babysitter, who they end up calling a nanny. Back in the past though, and Natalie actually finds herself enjoying being there and being with old Caleb, surprisingly. This next passage feels like it could have been written by Debbie Pearl, and it made me uncomfortable, but here we are. And me? I think the Lord is happy with me. I can feel him all around me, stronger than I ever have in my life. Sometimes when I'm doing laundry or getting eggs from the coop, I tilt my expression to catch the cold winter sunlight, and I swear I can feel his breath on my cheek. When I was a girl, I thought of the Lord the way other girls in my class thought of crushes. I imagined the lines of his face each night when I fell asleep. I doodled his name in my notebook in cursive, swirling hearts in glitter gel pen pink. I wondered if he thought of me as frequently as I thought of him. And sometimes, as a reward I think for such pure thoughts, he would enter my body, filling me with an unbearable pleasure, a sense of communion so deep and animal and satiating that it left me slick and panting upon its departure. I stopped experiencing these moments the day I was married, but now, miracle of miracles, the feeling has returned. I feel him everywhere. In the air, in the ground beneath my feet. I feel him too on the evenings old Caleb reaches for my hips beneath the quilt. Pleasure beyond imagining, like I'm in a constant state of ascending. For the first time in my life, I'm being properly satisfied by a man. I'm not alone. I'm not stuck, not lost, not forgotten, not punished. I am here, a chosen one, with him, and I will remain here, wherever here is, until he decides to take me elsewhere. Sometimes, when I have a moment to myself, I drop to my knees and let the gratitude hum out of me in waves. I cry hysterically, overcome by the magnitude of his power and his glories. So Debbie Pearl. And then when she's been there for 2 months, she realised she hasn't got her period once. So she's like, oh my god, I must be pregnant. That's the first place her mind goes. Alright, hi everyone, and welcome back to day 2, part 3 of trying to film this. I am so sorry if I look a mess. I've just cried all my makeup off in a little video I filmed for my second channel just before this, in which I unboxed this little beauty, which is my cuddle clone of Kyra. It's a stuffed animal toy made to look just like her, with all her markings. It's got her little tummy star, it's got her white toes, it's got her little grey beard and all the little floppy tongue. She's so gorgeous. And yeah, I've just been quite emotional and I'm trying not to cry again. I've just had such a cry. I cried all my makeup off, so I probably look a bit of a mess. I've tried to sort my face out, but honestly, I'm just a mess right now. So I'm going to try and get through this as best I can. I also realised in the last part of filming, I didn't actually show you the book. Here it is, Yesteryear, by Caro Claire Burke. And it's a beautiful book with a beautiful, beautiful cover. And I just kind of wanted to show this off because it is so completely gorgeous. But yeah, I thought we'd just kind of jump into this now. And sorry if you're listening to the audio only version and can't see the cover or my little cuddle coo right now, but trust me, they're gorgeous. I say day 2, it's actually been like 5 days since I recorded the last bit because I went away to go stay with Alex for the weekend, which was lovely. We had a really nice day out in Wensleydale, which was gorgeous. We went to Bolton Castle, absolutely beautiful. We looked around the gardens as well, and then we went for a really beautiful cycle around all the countryside up there, and it was just, yeah, absolutely wonderful. And then on Saturday we did some gardening together in a little community garden, and yeah, it was absolutely lovely. I've had a great weekend, but I'm a little bit out of sorts because I've not been filming this for like 5 days, so yeah, I've just had a little refresher, seen where I am, listened back to what I filmed before, and what'd you say, little cuddle coo? You know, we should just get on with it, yeah? We can do that, Mapes? Oh, God, I've already cried all over her. I love her so much. So, back in the flashbacks of the present, and Natalie has, at this point in the book, hired a nanny, Louise, and she's grateful that I would never have to be alone with my children again, which is something, isn't it? Natalie's mother, at this point, worries about Natalie's online content and what this is going to do to the children because she's posting the children so much. And again, this feels very Ruby Frankie. It just seems very ostentatious. She had said when we met a week earlier for coffee, "Do you really want so many people seeing Jessa in a diaper?" I shrugged mildly. I already felt quite certain that my children were far safer online, their best selves preserved inside the four walls of my phone like little bugs in amber, than they could ever be in the real world. I thought of the woman at the grocery store, her disturbed expression. Even the cruelest comment I received online was no match for that memory of her face. I think you just don't understand how social media works. But what if someone develops a fascination with one of them? Or with you? You mean like a kidnapper or something? She nodded nervously. Mother, I highly doubt I'm important enough for someone to kidnap. Do you know how many accounts online have tens of millions of followers, let alone hundreds of millions? Yeah, but that's not the point, is it? No matter how big your platform is, it only takes one person. And it's your job as a parent to protect your kids from even the potential of that one person, you know? Like, don't put your kids online. It's not hard. I'm currently, as I've said before, staying with my parents while I'm like in the process of buying a house, which long process can take months. So I'm very, very grateful to have them here as this kind of backup while I'm in that whole process. And while my life's a bit upside down after losing the little one. But yeah, like I say, I'm here. And so obviously being their house, there are photos of the grandkids here with my niece and nephew. And I noticed while I was filming some extra bits of I edit over in that corner of the room. I've got my little computer set up over there. And I was noticing one day as I was filming one of my little, hey, editing me, let me just add a little update to the video things. There were photos in the background, which were over there, of my niece and nephew. And I was like, crap, I don't want them in the video. Like, it doesn't matter that they're just tiny things in the background. Like, I don't want people seeing my niece and nephew. They're kids. They don't deserve to be online. You know what I mean? They don't have a choice in the matter. They're not consenting to this. They're kids. They can't consent. Like, yeah, I'm not comfortable with it. So I blurred out that entire bit of my video because I was like, I don't want anyone seeing my niece and nephew like this. It's just, we as adults have a responsibility to protect the kids in our lives, and it just, I don't know why this is so hard for some people to understand. It's far easier to just not post kids online than it is to make a point of posting them. So anyway, the way I see it, I guess, is there's just rarely a good reason for kids to be shown online in any capacity, especially when that capacity is like family vlogging or something like that. I would say there's like, I don't know, it's difficult because like part of me is like, well, I can understand the need for like child actors in certain situations, but then again, there's been so much abuse in that industry and it's messed up so many kids that part of me is like, well, is there even a need for that if it's going to end up with abused kids? So I feel like the need for an accurate representation in art doesn't outweigh a child's need for safety. You know what I mean? Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Let's get back to the book. Other than this, Natalie has been trying to hide the money she makes from Instagram from Caleb because she says he can't be trusted because, you know, he's a massive man-child. But he finds out how much she's making, so now she has to come up with other ways of hiding her income from him. It's all very, very unhealthy. You know what I mean? Like, if you hadn't married a man-child, you wouldn't need to hide money from him. If you felt safe with him, you wouldn't need to hide money from him. The fact that she doesn't trust him with what should be joint income, yeah, says a lot, doesn't it? But at the same time, you know, hiding income from your spouse could very easily be a sign of financial abuse. So there's nuance to this situation. We then get the story in the book of hiring Shannon, the producer, and her immediately being kind of disillusioned by the whole place and the way of life because it's not what she expected. I was like 90% sure at this point that Shannon was just there as a plant to get dirt on her for an expose story or something. Having now read the book and looking back, I don't actually think that's why she went into it. I genuinely think she believed in this lifestyle and she believed in the brand as a whole and she believed in everything, and then she became disillusioned and she just kind of happened to like film stuff along the way and photograph stuff and be like, crap, like I'm concerned by what I'm seeing. Maybe the world should see this too, you know? So I don't think she went in with an evil plan. Even if she did, was it evil? Anyway, Shannon is a very, very interesting, complex character in this that I wish I had more time to kind of go into and talk about, but this video is already going to be long enough, so I'll let you discuss her in the comments, because fascinating, really, really fascinating. What is interesting to me as well is how naive Natalie is throughout this whole thing. Like, she doesn't really see anything wrong with Shannon filming everything she does, and she doesn't really see anything wrong with just giving Shannon the passwords to all her accounts and giving her access to everything, you know? Like, even during her father-in-law's run for president, and there's all these, like, big political, I guess, like, rallies and events and stuff like that, Shannon's there, secretly filming stuff behind the scenes, and Natalie's too stupid to put two and two together and think that that might be a problem. She's like, well, she works for me, it's fine, like, what's she gonna do with this stuff? It's like, well, what is she gonna do with the stuff? So part of me is like, well, this is kind of Natalie's fault for being so trusting and naive. But then again, you can't really judge someone too harshly for being naive. But then at the same time, like, Shannon's only showing the truth of the situation eventually. So it's not like she's doing anything wrong. It, again, complex, nuanced, love this. Lot to discuss here. It's during this point in the campaign that I saw Doug as a sort of like Donald Trump type character. I've mentioned this before, but this is where it really kind of becomes obvious. So Natalie's fans call her a Nazi for being associated with him, and after one particular campaign speech, Shannon says, 2 hours later we were walking back to the car, moving in a slow march along with the crowd, people with folding chairs and soup thermoses and rolled up Confederate flags tucked under their armpits. That was terrifying, Shannon said quietly next to me. I laughed crisply. You're telling me, try being legally bound to him. No, Natalie, that speech was terrifying. I mean, I know your father-in-law is intense. I always knew he was intense, but don't you think that was different? I sighed, tried to think back on the speech. Something coastal cities. The world so clearly losing its way. Nuclear families disintegrating, and the children. My mother gasped in memory. The children. And the women, and suddenly the men. And the women, and certainly the men, but Doug had spoken so quickly, and the speaker system, echoing and reverberating in on itself, had warped everything so quickly. America, Doug roared in my head still. America, how long have we? How long till we? America, oh, where are you? It was a combination of 1,000 conversations I'd heard throughout my life. The only difference in my mind was that it had been dumbed down a bit, and maybe sharpened at the tip. He's gonna win, Natalie, Shannon said when I didn't say anything. You realise that, right? That he's gonna win. I rolled my eyes. It's a performance, Shannon. It's political theatre, not real. How is a political election not real? I don't mean that. I just mean, I gestured at the crowd around us. All of this, the showmanship, the bravado. And Shannon says to her, do you honestly think there are no consequences to performance? There's other things as well where, like, Doug makes a lot of, like, white supremacist references and claims and, you know, dances around those talking points in his speeches. And, you know, it's very clear why people are calling him a Nazi. He makes a lot of fascist claims. But again, Natalie kind of doesn't realize this, and she definitely doesn't realize it's a bad thing, because this is what she's grown up around, this is what she's used to, this is what she's surrounded by in her life. She's just like, yeah, it's just politics, and if it sounds a bit scary, that's because it's just theatre. It's like she doesn't quite understand the consequences of what she's seeing and what she's a part of and what she is essentially endorsing. So meanwhile, Shannon has been getting closer to everyone in the family, everyone except Natalie. This ends up with her doing things like encouraging the other nannies to ask for a raise. She teaches the kids about all sorts of stuff they didn't know before, like the fact oceans exist. Wild. There's a whole other like subplot in here that I don't think I've even really touched on, but it's about like Caleb homeschooling the kids with like his own curriculum, and how he doesn't educate them properly. And yeah, I'm thinking about like the Duggars here, Carissa Collins, because we've all seen the curriculums they use, if you can even call them curriculums at this point, and how like a lot of it is less based around fact and having kids reach the milestones they should be at with, like, you know, basics of like reading and maths and so on. But instead, like, Caleb focuses a lot on pushing these conspiracy theories on the kids, and they don't know these basic things, like the fact that there are oceans, you know, wild. Anyway, one of the other things that Shannon eventually does is seduces Caleb. as in she becomes involved with him. Natalie calls it a seduction from Shannon's part, but Shannon's 19 at this point, maybe 20. She's 21 by the time she leaves employment, so she's still young. She's basically a kid. She's young, she's impressionable, whatever. Caleb's in his 30s, mid-30s. I don't think she was the one seducing him. Plus, he's a boss. Power dynamics, you know? At this point in the flashbacks, Natalie is 6 months pregnant with her 6th baby, so this is all happening not long before the book starts. The night Caleb told me what happened with Shannon, I was 6 months pregnant with our 6th child, and I didn't sleep a wink. I lay there in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, while my husband snored peacefully next to me. The sound made smoke pour out of my ears. But of course he slept peacefully. As soon as Caleb told me what was going on, what was happening under my nose, he had effectively handed the problem over to me. That was, after all, how all good marriages worked. My husband moved instinctually through the world. He did things he wanted to do and didn't do the things he didn't want to do. And I, happy wife, happy life, trailed beatifically in front of and behind him, sweeping the ground clean for him to walk forward, and then just as quickly sweeping his messy footsteps away. That's what they told me to do, right? All those women who came before me. Be a mother, be a wife, keep the household clean. Liars. Every Christian woman I had ever met had been a big fat lying bastard. Lord have mercy on their big fat lying bastard souls. Caleb was in love with Shannon. That's what he told me the night before. He was in love. Truly in love for the first time in his life. At that moment in his little monologue, I did flinch, I'll admit that. Not like you noticed. He was too busy landing the final blow. I'm moving to New York, he said in the darkness, practically breathless with excitement. I'm starting a new life. She really challenges me, you know? She pushes me on my ideas. Our conversations are incredible. It's a lot, isn't it? Like, he's such a man-child. I thoroughly dislike Caleb a lot. Natalie, and at this point I said to her credit, confronts Shannon like this. I stepped inside her bedroom and shut the door behind me. I smiled softly. I'm sure you can imagine why I came up here. There it was, a whole world spinning in her expression. A long moment passed, and then she sat down on her bed. Yeah, she said. I guess I can. He said you're moving to New York together. Christ, Shannon muttered. That is... yikes. My husband is... I said and paused. Took a moment to collect myself, smoothed the wrinkles of my fury into place. He can be gullible. So if there was at any point... I paused again. I needed to be careful. Maybe she was recording the conversation. Not likely, but not impossible. So Natalie does have some awareness. I'm aware that it's inappropriate. He's your employer, and so if there was any pressure on your part, or if he promised you any money, so I'm glad she did this. Shannon says no, he didn't pressure her. But for the first time in this book, I had to give Natalie credit here for asking about this first and foremost. I thought this was great. I thought this was commendable. Other than this, they start being awful to each other. It all gets worse from here on out, and Natalie just gets worse and worse and worse, as we'll go on to see. Shannon tells Natalie that she's absolutely awful because she treats Caleb like he's stupid, but he is, and that Natalie should be grateful for everything that Caleb has created, even though Natalie did all of it. Wild. But again, like, I guess I understand where Shannon's coming from, because she is also kind of brainwashed, you know? She thought this was this perfect life, this wonderful thing, and she's clearly from this background as well, where even though she's a bit more out of it than Natalie was, and she's a bit more educated, and she's a bit more aware, she's clearly still from this background where she thinks men are the providers and builders and do everything. Like, so she just assumes Caleb's built it all and Caleb did everything, when in reality, he did nothing. It was all Natalie. So you can't really... I mean, you can fault Shannon for thinking that, but you can't necessarily blame her because it's her upbringing and her background and how she's been socialized and brought up, you know? But anyway, Natalie then calls Shannon a whore and a homewrecker. Again, I understand her anger. If I was Natalie, I'd probably do the same in her position, but just objectively, not really a fan of a 19-year-old child being blamed for this, you know? But I understand the emotions, I understand the anger, I get it. Yeah, overall though, like, I know they're fictional, but I did just find myself wanting to scream at these two women for having, like, this sort of fight and rivalry and nastiness towards each other over a mediocre little man-child who is completely not worth it, you know? Anyway, this is where things get absolutely horrific, and Natalie tries to strangle Shannon. It kind of just comes out of nowhere. It happens. Like, there's this attack. She eventually lets go, but still, that's pretty horrific. Turns out this whole incident was way worse than I even realised on a first reading, but we'll get to it when we get another revelation later. There was something that I missed in this passage on a first reading that, I just, for some reason, glossed over it. And it had a whole other meaning and made me see this scene in a whole other way. And I think it's a really good testament to how this book is written and, I guess, the efficacy of unreliable narrators. Because we're seeing this from Natalie's perspective, right? We're being told about it from her perspective. So of course you gloss over the details that she wants us to gloss over. We don't see them as bad as they are and so on. Like, she misses out these important parts. So then later, when we're listening to Shannon's side of things, we're like, wait, did that actually happen? And you go back and reread it with the context that you know, and you're like, oh, crap. So we'll discuss that when we get to it, but just bear in mind there's something missing from this section on purpose, you know? Natalie then goes into full damage control mode and she calls up Doug and asks him for help. She knows that if Caleb does leave her, she will have absolutely nothing because of the prenuptial agreements and because the farm that she has built is all in his name, her whole brand and everything, all the money she's made from her work will go to Caleb. How unfair is that? At this point, she has managed to siphon off $70,000 in savings, which, I mean, to someone like me, that's a life changer, you know? Someone who is from a working class background, who is still, like, you know, I'd say I'm, like, in the middle classes now, but still at a point where you live paycheck to paycheck and, you know, saving for a house and stuff. It takes time. It absolutely does. So something like having $70,000 in savings, unimaginable to someone like me. Life changer. However, to someone like Natalie, who has 5 children to look after, that's not money that will last long, you know? So we cut back to the present/past, if you will, the whole 1800s looking farmhouse timeline, and things have been happening. Maeve, the youngest daughter, is now seriously ill with a really, really bad fever. Meanwhile, Mary has a little crush on a local man with a beard, whose name we don't learn. We later find out that's for a good reason. But Mary has a crush on him. We then cut back to another flashback in chapter 50, and we learn, or at least it seems, like the Q&A bits that we were reading in the very first part of the book, if you remember them, they were actually questions and rehearsed answers that the new PR team that Doug has hired had sent over to Natalie for her to, like, rehearse and answer, so that any drama that might arise from this, any, you know, if she's asked questions by the press or whatever, she has these rehearsed answers that are PR friendly, and that's, oh, I'm dropping my phone, that's what she was doing in that first part of the book. She was rehearsing these answers with the PR team. Back in the 1800s, and Mary's now really worried about Maeve, and so Mary is like to Natalie, you're going to have to go and get a doctor, yeah? So Maeve helps her pack food, and then Natalie sets off on the lookout for a doctor, but also with the intention of never ever coming back to the farm. I said at this point, and this is one of my, I would call it like a big criticism of the book, but one of my main criticisms is that I do wish we'd had a little more in these 1800s scenes. I wish we got to know a little bit more about old Caleb. I wish we got to know in more detail about his relationship with Natalie and what that was like on a day-to-day basis. Like, tell us more about him and how he treats her, like that. I wish that, can't speak. I wish that had been developed a little bit more, but that's okay. I'll talk more about my criticisms of the book at the end of this video, because there are a few. It's not a perfect book, but it's still very good. Anyway, back to the flashbacks in our time and, you know, the whole PR crisis time. Natalie wakes up one morning and tells Caleb that Shannon has been gathering evidence on them and doing stuff behind their backs, like giving Clementine, the eldest daughter, a phone against Natalie's wishes and all sorts of stuff like that. Caleb, being the useless man-child that he is, simply snorts and goes back to sleep. He doesn't give a damn. And then all hell breaks loose. Caleb starts getting emails like this, and he finally realizes this might be a problem. So the emails he gets are things like, I'm reaching out from Pop Weekly magazine for comment on the assault allegations that have recently, before another email dinged onto the notification screen, looking for comment. And then another, press inquiry. Natalie, Caleb said, you have to believe me. I didn't hurt Shannon. I didn't do anything to her, I swear. Shut up, I snarled. There was no time to explain to Caleb what had happened. While Mama was cleaning up your mess, darling, she made a little oopsie herself. I threw the phone at Caleb's chest. It hit him and he let out a squeak of fear. So at this point, like, Caleb hears abuse and assault allegations or whatever and thinks he must be the one accused, not realizing it's Natalie. Again, feel a little bit of the whole, like, patriarchal sexism is coming in there, like, but, you know, what can we say? Men usually are the ones assaulting women, so I guess at least he made the right assumption there, or the wrong assumption. I don't know what I'm saying anymore. I'm tired, I'm emotional. We're just getting through this together, okay? We can do this. I said at this point, I can't say I feel an ounce of pity for any of these people, but damn is it entertaining, because the drama. At this point, Shannon goes public with Natalie's assault, and it is all over the news. She's giving interviews, and Natalie, Caleb, and Doug, like I say, go into like mass PR mode. Doesn't help them that while she was working for them, Shannon took like a crap ton of photos and videos while she was there that she's sharing too. So all these claims she has of, like, you know, illegally using pesticides and claiming the veg is organic, mistreatment of the animals, mistreatment of the children, all this like stuff. Shannon has videos of it all. Again, she's only showing the truth though. She's not making stuff up. She's only showing what's there. So, is she really the bad guy in this? No, she's not. Not at all. But it is crazy because this is such a well-written book, and the fact it's from Natalie's perspective, I almost found myself sympathizing with her at times. And at times I was like, yeah, you know what, if someone slept with my husband after living in those crappy circumstances of like having to put up with him for all those years, I can't say for sure I wouldn't snap and be angry either. Like, I like to think I wouldn't, but no, maybe I would. I mean, I wouldn't do what Natalie did, as we'll find out, but I think I'd be angry too. Maybe not strangling and assaulting in the way she did, but definitely angry. Like, again, I can understand maybe some of the name calling, even though objectively I don't like it. I can understand why in that heightened emotional state it might just come out, you know? But, you know, at the same time, obviously, objectively, I'm hypercritical of people like Natalie in the real world and their lifestyles and their ideologies. So obviously I found myself siding with Shannon and knowing that, like, yeah, she was completely in the right here. She was a victim in this and she's only exposing the truth about them. So, but the fact that you even start to feel any empathy for Natalie, I think is a real testament to how well this book is written. And also, like, I mean, it's a testament to how complex the characters are, definitely. But also, like, I find it's very realistic too, because I found this happening in real life as well. So I'm trying to like explain this. I'm going off script here, but for example, when I was making that big 7-hour-long video on Paul and Morgan, for example, after watching literally hundreds of hours of their content and just submerging myself in like the last 10 years of their life, I did that for like a month straight, basically. And I found myself having so much like empathy for them as people and really feeling for them at times. And it's such a confusing place to be in, where you're like, I see them as real people, understand them as real people, and I see that in some circumstances they are the victims, and in some circumstances, like, you know, they deserve a lot of compassion for the things they've been through. So, for example, Morgan's fertility struggles and things like that. Like, you really, really do feel for them, and you have so much compassion for them. But at the same time, you're like, oh, but then they give you whiplash, because one minute you go from being like, oh my God, I just want to give them a hug, to like them spewing racist and homophobic nonsense and transphobic nonsense, like, and all this horrific stuff online. You're like, oh, no. So it's interesting how you can feel so much for people, but at the same time be so critical of the objectively bad parts of them, you know? And I feel like that's what it is with Natalie. We spend so long in her perspective and in her head, we start to empathize with her on these certain bits, but at the same time, objectively, you are so critical of these bad things she's done and continues to do. So it's, in that sense, it's a really damn well written book, and it's really realistic, and it's like real life, and it's the things you actually feel when you're watching these influences. And so for that, excellent writing, really excellent writing, fantastic. Like I say, the author really shows a really good fundamental understanding of who these fundy influencers are and what motivates them. And some people I've seen in the reviews say that they find it a little one-dimensional. It's like, oh, not all influencers are like you. And I'm like, but you know what? The number of parallels I can draw between this fictional fundy influencer and the ones that I've covered over the last 8 years or so, like, I do think it's quite an accurate take on so many aspects of their life, you know? It's, yeah. Anyway, where were we? So in the midst of all the PR crisis, Natalie tries to turn to her mum for support, and instead her mum just like really opens up to her about her own life and where she is and how she's been going through a lot of ideological changes herself at the minute. So one of the big things that her mum tells her is how her and Abigail, remember the sister, the other daughter, had been going to a new and more progressive church, and how she opens up and she says that she's actually been lying her whole life about what happened with the girl's dad. He didn't die, obviously, and Natalie's like, yeah, I knew that. But it also turns out he didn't cheat on the mum. She cheated on him. And then instead of like running away with the affair partner, she realised, actually, I don't want to be with a man. I don't want to live with a man. I like being alone. I like being single. I like being a single parent. I like being a single woman. I don't want a man in my life. And since she's been going to this new progressive church and Abigail's been dating the pastor, she's like, you know what, I think I was wrong about a lot of the things that I was brought up with, and a lot of the things that the old church I went to taught me, and a lot of the things that I passed on to you girls, and I'm starting to like see this whole new world. And she becomes a lot more progressive about issues like gay marriage and stuff like that. And Natalie is shocked and appalled, and she's like, how dare you think this? How dare you have cheated on dad? How dare you want to be single? How dare you now be supporting gay marriage? How dare you with all of this stuff? And she tells her mother that she's being taken advantage of by her new church, and she's been taken advantage of by the pastor that Abigail's dating. And one of the things she tells her mum is that you're too nice. And in response, her mum says, do you know what, Natalie? I don't think I am too nice. In fact, I'm very proud of how nice I am. I think it's a good thing. And if I'm being honest, I'm very disappointed with how not nice you are. Mother, you have no idea how hard things are right now. If you just listen to me. And here is where the strangest moment of my entire life happened. My mother, that good Christian woman, snapped. No, she shouted, so loudly that I held the phone away from my ear. You listen to me, young lady. This is your problem. This has always been your problem. You think kindness is some silly, frivolous side virtue when it is in fact the whole damn thing. I'd never heard her say a curse word in my life. Mother, I spluttered. She roared in return, her anger vibrating through the phone like some energetic hex. Why is it so hard for you to be kind? And at this point, I'm like, good on her. Love this. Love this for her. Love the mother. I will say the mother and Abigail, great characters. Love them. They're great. And I like their arch. I like who they become. Really damn impressive. And I love that she called her out for this. I think it's great. Again, though, you do feel for Natalie a bit here. You feel sorry for her. She is going through a crappy time and she does kind of need her mum, but at the same time, she's just reaping the consequences of her own actions. So you feel so many conflicting things. Back in the past, and Natalie is walking through the wood when she eventually stumbles across something. A little wooden hut with a blue truck outside and a cabin that has a sign over the front door saying Manosphere. And I was like, what the hell? So clearly this isn't the past. And it is, or at least this is what I was thinking. I thought it was that theory we came up with earlier where it isn't the past, but it's like the future, but it's like they're living in the past. That was my theory earlier on. That's what I was like, it's got to be that right now. And again, I said, as long as we don't get it, it's all a dream, I'm going to be happy. And I will tell you now, it's not an it's all a dream, so I was happy. I think it's a good, solid reveal. We're back in the present day, and Shannon is telling her story on TV, and it's interesting because as much as Natalie is criticised for putting on this front of, like, you know, pretending to be someone she isn't, Shannon kind of does the same thing too, in a way. So at this point, she's changed her hair and clothes to look less alternative and more trustworthy to the public. So even though the story that she's telling is entirely the truth, it's interesting that she has to, or she feels she has to appear a certain way to be more credible. You know, if she'd stayed the way she was with facial piercings and pink hair and dressing the way she did, it's interesting that she feels, and that others told her, the public probably wouldn't have taken her as seriously and wouldn't have believed her, which is obviously sad, and that's something we should be critical of the public for, and it's sad that she felt she had to do that, but it just, yeah, interesting, isn't it? Again, all these little things, like, I think it's so nuanced and well thought out, and there's so many little things we can discuss about this book. It's great. So like I said, the story she's telling is the truth, and she talks about how when she was 19, she started working at the ranch. She's 21 now, Caleb's 35, so like I said earlier, their affair, if you can call it that, is pretty damn creepy on his part. Other than this, she brings up the things we mentioned before, her concerns about the animal abuse, the kids not wanting to be filmed, not having a proper education, all of which anger Caleb and Natalie, who are watching this on TV. But again, it's accurate. So it's also during this time that Shannon talks about the attack by Natalie. And as I alluded to earlier, it seems there might be more to it than we got from Natalie's perspective. Something I missed on a first read, and the thing I alluded to earlier, is that when Natalie strangled Shannon, when she finally got off her, she was literally straddling her as she strangled her, and Shannon's jeans were pushed down by the time Natalie got off her. So she'd been wearing jeans at the start, and they were pushed down, like down to her knees by the time Natalie got off. In the interview, Shannon says how she felt violated, and the implication is she may have been sexually assaulted or raped by Natalie in the attack. This was obviously downplayed in Natalie's narration of the event, and it was just, her jeans were down. That was it. That's all we got in the original retelling of what happened from Natalie's perspective, because Natalie obviously is downplaying it. She's not going to tell us everything. She's this unreliable narrator who obviously wants to make herself look good and like the victim. But now Shannon's just laying it all out, and it's just disgusting. I'll be honest, it was at this point all my sympathy for Natalie kind of went out the window, and it was like all this like empathy and compassion I'd been building up, where I was like, well, I know she's in the wrong, but I can see, gone at this point. I was like, monster. But not only was I shocked that it had happened and like shocked that Natalie did that, I was shocked that I missed it. And the fact that, like I said, being from Natalie's perspective and her being this unreliable narrator, we were, I guess, kind of meant to gloss over it and not understand how serious it was. But I was so shocked. I was like, I had to go back and reread, and I was like, oh my, like, the implication is there. The admission that her jeans were down were there. But it is so easy to miss. And I think that's kind of very telling of society as a general. Like, society in general, isn't it? We've spent so long hearing about stories of rape and sexual assault from perpetrators who are downplaying what happened and telling us, well, this wasn't really rape. This wasn't serious. She wanted it. She deserved it. Like, when we spend so long hearing from the perpetrators and them downplaying it, it just becomes so normalized that we do, like, we stop looking for these red flags and we just gloss over it. And I think, again, also because we weren't necessarily expecting it from a woman to a woman, because that isn't the norm. Again, I think that's why it's easy to kind of gloss over it. Maybe if Caleb had been the one attacking Shannon and he'd had this throwaway line about her jeans were down, maybe we would have picked up on it. Maybe I would have picked up on it more. I think this was like showing me my own bias and my own blinders, and it's made me more aware of that and want to change that, you know? I know this is a fictional story, but I think these are lessons that we can learn and apply to our real life, you know? Oh, sorry, baby, out your nose then. These are lessons that we can apply to our real life. Like I say, yeah, I think if it was Caleb attacking Shannon and that jeans line had been in there, I'd have zeroed in on it and been like, well, we know what the implications of that are, and I'd have been much more on it. But the fact it was a woman doing it to another woman, I absolutely just glossed over it, didn't think that hard, didn't read into it, and then you get this revelation and you're shocked. Even though the implication was there all along. And yeah, it's something I'm definitely knowing, like, it's something I understand is a fault within me that I missed that. And I'm glad that it's been pointed out to me in this way. And it's something that I want to make sure I do better on in my real life going forward, you know? And again, I love a book that challenges me and makes me think about my behavior, my preconceptions, the way I read things, the way I interpret things. I think it's fantastic. Really, really do. Cannot fault it for this. The other thing is that this all kind of makes sense within the context of Natalie. So this is something that I think I'm pretty sure I mentioned when I filmed a few days back. It was only like an hour ago for you guys. But there was a scene in the beginning of the book that I mentioned I wanted to come back to now. I wasn't going to talk about it then, I want to talk about it now. Do you remember when Natalie... Do you remember the chapters when Natalie first went to college and she had that night when she was drinking and it was her first and only time having alcohol, and her roommate went out with some other girls and they had a good time and it was fine, and then Natalie got grumpy and she went back to the room early and she tried to go to sleep. Well, something happened in that room that I want to talk about now. So the first night, when drunk, Natalie was already in bed at this time. Natalie's roommate Rena brought a man back, and Rena was drunk, the man was drunk, Natalie was drunk. Rena and the man thought Natalie was asleep, but she wasn't. And Rena and the man, she was into the man, but then he did something to her that Rena didn't like. And Rena specifically asked him to stop and not do that. We don't know what it was because it's all in the dark and Natalie's just hearing this, but he did something, Rena didn't like it, she asked him to stop, and she specifically said it hurt. He then asked if he should leave, but she was like, no, I don't want you to. And he then continued to have sex with her, but it was clear that she was still in pain during this time, and she specifically asked him to slow down because you're hurting me. It's not clear whether he did or not, but when he left, Rena immediately just left the room and was clearly in a bit of a state, presumably to go to the bathroom. And Natalie at this point is only thinking about herself and how traumatic listening to someone have sex was for her. She doesn't realise that Rena had been hurt by this man and had to ask him to stop. He then continued to hurt her, and she had to ask him again to stop doing that, and it's unclear whether he did, because he definitely continued to have sex with her until he'd finished, and then he left. But there's no indication of if he actually listened to her or not, and if she was okay with it, or if she felt violated, or anything like that. All Natalie cares about is, oh no, I had to listen to this, bleh. And then she throws up over the side of the bed. And the focus is entirely on Natalie. She only cares how this made her feel. She doesn't understand the significance of her having to tell this man to stop because he's hurting her twice. So later, Natalie told her friends about this, and she calls him a predator, and she says he did these things I didn't like, and when I asked him to stop, he didn't. And at this point, Natalie absolutely lost it on Rena, and she calls her a liar, and she's like, you're making this up, you wanted it, and she says all these absolutely horrible things to Rena. And like I say, since we only saw this incident through, and the Shannon incident, through Natalie's perspective, even when there are plenty of red flags that we can see now, the jeans being down, the straddling in the Shannon incident, the repeatedly asking him to stop and saying it hurts in the Rena incident. Because we're only seeing it from Natalie's perspective, and she thinks, especially with the Rena one, she's like, no, it can't have been assault because blah, 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 and all her things. Looking back now, we can be like, oh, it seems Natalie doesn't really have a full understanding of consent. And that, again, makes me doubt her versions of events and kind of trust Rena when she says what happened to her was assault, and trust Shannon when she says what happened to her made her feel violated, and so on. And so because of all this, obviously I find myself supporting Shannon and Rena most in this story, and realizing that this character we've been following all along has clearly been having these issues understanding consent, but it's not necessarily clear until it all comes together at this point. It's quite a shock. It's not what I expected, but it feels quite accurate because we know a lot of fundie creators don't seem to fully understand the concept of consent, Look at one of the videos I've got coming up that I'm going to film soon that I've just finished writing the script for. I started it the other day and I've just finished it tonight. It's looking at Morgan and Carl, Morgan of Paul and Morgan, their third podcast episode, in which Morgan keeps going on and on about how, wives owe sex to their husbands. If you're married, you owe your partner sex. You shouldn't be saying no. It's very clear from that she doesn't fully understand the concept of consent. From a lot of the podcasts that Girl Defined, Kristen and Bethany, from what they put out, it's clear they don't fully understand consent, and this is quite common amongst fundies. And it's clearly what's happening with Natalie here. She doesn't understand that even an assault she witnessed, she doesn't understand it as an assault because she doesn't understand consent. And so not only does that have consequences for Rena because, Natalie called her a liar to her face, and obviously that's got to be very traumatic for a victim, but it means that, she herself can end up being a perpetrator of assault as well, because again, she doesn't fully understand it, and it's just, very scary. Right. Anyway, back to the book. Sorry, there was a lot of off-script rambling from me there, so I really hope it made sense. I just have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this book. It's so damn good. A book hasn't made me think like this in a while. It hasn't given me such an emotional response. There's so much in here that I want to talk about and could talk about. Like, you can pick any random page and pick a passage from it, and I could probably be here talking for like 3 hours about just like this one random page, you know? It's so many thoughts. I love this. It's everything I want in a book. It is entertaining, it is easy to read, but it is damn thought-provoking, and I love that. Right, so back to the book. What was also really interesting to me was the father-in-law's response to this public revelation. So this is Natalie narrating what she thinks her father-in-law is thinking. If only my husband had raped our producer. That's basically what Doug said that night, what he roared for hours and hours, while a rotating cast of side characters, me, then Amelia, then finally just the lawyers, stared numbly at nothing. If only his stupid little son had raped our stupid little producer. If that had happened, it would have been over and forgotten in 2 weeks. But a predatory woman? Unthinkable. A good Christian mother and wife who allegedly found another woman attractive? Who took what she wanted without asking? Kill the witch. Burn her. And honestly, shocking, but this is again such a great thing to bring up, because men do get away with sexual violence all the time. But the minute it's a woman, people seem quicker to crucify her often. But not true. There are some exceptions, like especially when it's predatory older women with younger boys. There seems to be another double standard there where that's seen as like cool by certain men when it's not. It's still predatory. But yeah, in cases like this where it's a woman with a woman, like, yeah, it seems they're a lot quicker to blame and crucify than they are with men. It's infuriating to me that men don't get the same response. People always go on about how false allegations will ruin a man's life. You know, they don't. Real allegations don't ruin a man's life, you know? A man can rape a woman one day and then, you know, the next still have his job and entire career ahead of him, all this money and support and people who believe in him and do this and this and, you know, become president of the United States if he wants. Being an actual rapist doesn't ruin a man's life. But the minute it's a woman, yeah, there's often a lot more pressure on women. There's a lot more disgust for women who do it. Don't get me wrong, this is not saying we should go easier on women. I'm saying, where is this disgust for the men as well? A rapist is a rapist no matter the gender. So why can so many men keep getting away with it? This is actually something I'm discussing in another video I'm making about the online so-called rape academy. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about that, and I'm going to be filming a video about that either later tonight or another day this week. My script is done. I have a lot of thoughts about it. But yeah, it kind of all ties in. Oh, okay, right. I keep going off script today. I'm so sorry. I'm just talking and talking. So Natalie obviously starts getting a lot of hate online. Her sister is understandably disgusted with her. I mean, I think I'd be the same. If I found out that about one of my siblings, I'd be like, what the hell? Not that they would, I don't think, but, you know, that would be my response too. Then we switch back to the 1800s world for chapter 55, and Natalie enters the cabin marked Manosphere. Knowing what we know now, calling this cabin Manosphere is so damn cringy. And for that, I mean, like, the men are cringy, not the author. So believable that they would do this, but it's cringy, isn't it? Cuddle coo. Suddenly, I'm staring at a framed picture of my own family hanging on the opposite wall. It's from a long time ago. Me, Caleb, Clementine, Samuel, and baby Stetson. I don't remember the date it was taken, but I do remember the caption that accompanied it when I shared the picture online. God is pleased when families work together. Even little things like that are so revealing, aren't they? The fact that she doesn't remember the photo being taken or what happened or the actual memory about it, but she remembers her Instagram caption. So revealing. My heart is a wet, dead thing in my chest. My gaze swings slowly across the room. I see a dirt-packed floor and a table. On one table, a hot plate. Next to the hot plate, 3 plastic packs of ramen. Beneath the table, a mini fridge with a cord that's connected to an electrical outlet. Then, a radio in the other room flickering on. Through the farm window of this room, the front fender of a truck, and right in front of the window, another table, which is holding the radio, and in front of the radio, sitting on a plastic folding seat, is a man. By his feet is a pile of vegetables overflowing out of an old plastic milk crate. Potatoes, carrots, celery, beets. The kind Mary chops and dices and then drops into soup. There are grocery store stickers all over them. It's the neighbour, the shorter one. One of the men Mary has a crush on. Remember that. He's facing away from me, whistling softly, a tune I recognise. It takes me a moment to process what he's doing, pulling vegetable from one crate, pulling the grocery stickers off, then dropping them into another crate. The neighbour freezes. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The neighbour looks over his shoulder, his eyes are wide. Mama, he blurts. I take one step back, then another. Doctor? I whisper. Mama, he says again. His face is contorted into ecstasy or perhaps torture. And oh, the reveal. The two neighbour men are her sons, Samuel and Stetson. Oh. With that, she just starts running like crazy, like she keeps doing throughout this book, just run, run, run. Ugh. I am so here for whatever the hell is happening at this point. I love this. I was saying, like in my little thing, are we thinking at this point she got some kind of brain damage, maybe from a suicide attempt, which made her forget years of her life, and old Caleb is just Caleb years after the flashbacks, and even Natalie is much older because she hasn't been able to see herself, there's no like proper mirrors anywhere, so maybe she's like got 10 kids now, 10 kids, I don't know how many it is at this point, and Mary, the eldest, is actually the one she was pregnant with, like in the flashbacks. Not why I'm doing flashbacks like that. Mary, like the eldest, is the one she was pregnant with in the flashbacks, and so she's actually like a middle kid, and then the neighbours are older kids, Samuel and Stetson, and I said at this point, maybe Mary didn't have a crush, she was just like wistfully looking at her older brothers wishing she could get to know them. No, that was wrong. That theory was wrong. Mary absolutely had a crush on one of her older brothers because she didn't know they were her older brothers. Oh, the reveal is so good. We'll get there. I mean, we're basically at the end of the book now, so I'm not like spoiling anything too far ahead. It's just, I want you to be with it as it unfolds. It's great. So at this point, I was having so many thoughts, so many theories. Yes, great, love this. So, chapter 56 starts in the present day in the flashbacks, and Natalie's just like giving up. So she finds a bottle of pills that her mother-in-law gave her years ago. She doesn't know what they are, but she starts taking them. And these are the ones that led to her mother-in-law having an overdose years ago, and they seem to be some sort of like, kind of like an anti-anxiety medication, but also something that's not exactly healthy for you. It's never clear what they are. They're just little white pills that can be dangerous if you take too many. But first, she has a confrontation with Caleb. He thinks she's gay and humiliated him because she's gay. Like, that's the worst thing here, and not the fact she sexually assaulted someone, okay? He also asks if this is why she never wants to have sex with him, which is interesting because she's like, wait, you're the one who never wants to have sex with me. You can't even get a proper erection. And then he's like, yeah, because usually they're like a dead body. And that reminded me so much of Bethany Beals going on about lying there like dry bones in all of her sex courses. Ugh. Anyway, so they have this like back and forth of like, well, you don't want it. No, you don't want it. Well, you know. See, this is why communication is important. They end up just insulting each other back and forth, until Caleb just slaps Natalie. See, I don't like him. Awful. I'm like, okay, I know Natalie sexually assaulted someone, but that doesn't excuse a husband slapping his wife. But then again, there's been other instances of violence, like Natalie throwing the phone at him earlier and hitting him, so that's not excusable either. They're all awful, is the point I'm trying to make. So this is where it all kind of gets crazy, but actually not that unbelievable when you remember that Doug is kind of like this Donald Trump type of character, right? Do you know what they think of you online? Caleb said, standing over me. They think you're a woman who needs to be disciplined, that you're out of control, that your head is too big for your shoulders, and I should have reined you in years ago. And they're right. Effing devil bitch. My father was right. I should have divorced you when I had the chance. I looked up at him. Is that what he wants you to do? Divorce me? He took a step away from me, breathing hard. That's what he wanted me to do, yes. But you know what he wants to do now? I tasted iron. My lip was bleeding. Not in the slightest. He wants to kill you. I shook my head slowly. Don't be ridiculous. I'm not. He said a car accident would be easiest. These winding mountain roads, such a steep drop. He shrugged. It was his turn to watch me absorb this information. No one would suspect a thing. After all, what were good Christian men if not experts at making their good Christian women vanish from the world? How boring. How deeply and utterly unfair. I did everything I was supposed to do. I had the children and married the man and created a universe for us all to live in. And what was I going to get for it? Murdered, apparently. Featured in some future documentary about the latest pregnant woman to break her neck in a ditch somewhere. Caleb might go to jail for a year or two. Probably not. Regardless, he would be remarried within the decade. He'd have a second round of kids. Which is all horrifying, but honestly, yeah, I absolutely believe this is what happens to women in these types of families. I absolutely think men like Doug would make this happen. Seriously. I don't actually find this unbelievable. But in response to all this, Natalie says she can fix this by talking to Doug, which of course she can't. She's just a woman, remember? Back in the 1800s timeline, which we now know is not the actual 1800s, it's the future, Natalie is so scared and shocked and completely surprised by all of this that she ends up just running around in circles and accidentally finding her way back to the farm. There, old Caleb says that he's glad she didn't take Maeve with her because, you know, she's not vaccinated. I'm about to reply and then a strange sound cuts me off. The sound of an engine. A car is rolling up the driveway. Not a blue truck, but a red Subaru. Rolling slowly through the drops and divots in the bumpy dirt road until it pulls up to the barn and stops. The engine is killed. It's at this moment that a woman gets out of the car and approaches them, and apparently she looks just like Natalie, so I'm like, oh my god, this has to be Clementine, right? That's the only thing that makes sense. Then we get part 3 of the book, the final part, the future, and it is Clementine. She's an adult now, and this is where we get the whole big, reveal explained to us and everything. So this is not the 1800s, this is, as we expected, the future. They're still living on Yesteryear Ranch. They just don't have phone lines or internet, and they proper, got rid of all the modern stuff, so no electricity or anything like that. It's all just proper looking like 1800s farmland, like an 1800s ranch. And this is what they've been living in. The kids are her kids, but the ones she had after that pregnancy. This section is also interspersed with questions which seem to be part of some sort of interview of Natalie, and they give us a good idea of what's been happening in the years since all the drama. By the end of the book, we find out what this interview is. These questions are part of a pre-interview process for an interview that we're going to see at the end of this section, so we'll get there, don't worry. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Helen Mills. I'm Lucy, one of the producers assigned with preparing you for the interview tomorrow. Before we get started though, are you comfortable? Can we get you anything? Coffee, water, kombucha? And while I have you, this might be rude, please tell me if it's rude, but I just need to know, is it nice having so much access to choice after so many years of living sparsely, or are you overwhelmed? I believe you've already been prepped on the talking points of this interview, so I'll just run through a quick overview of what we plan to cover tomorrow. What we're really curious about is what happened after your former producer accused you of assault. Your social presence really changed after that. It became increasingly intense, I guess you could say, in terms of your homesteading lifestyle. And then when you chose to delete your account so abruptly, well, let's just say your followers had a lot of questions. We'll spend some time today unpacking that time period, and then after that we can talk about your father-in-law's failed presidential campaign, and then, well, you can drive that part of the conversation. How does that sound? So we're getting a lot of context filled in here. A lot of kind of exposition thrown at us, but it's kind of what we need for this end point in the book, you know? Back to adult Clementine being at the ranch, and they're all like, oh my god, why are you here? And Clementine turns around and goes, why are you here, Dad? Clementine says. Have you ever even asked yourself that? Why you're still here after all this time? Great question. We were trying to be good Christians. We really were. Trying. Good Christians. It's only here when I realise I'm speaking, and so I forge onwards, stumbling and stuttering like a radio channel moving in and out of frequency. Something about being a good wife, a good mother, something about God, something about love. Clementine watches me with an expression like flat soda as I trail off into silence, and then she turns to her father. Is she always like this now? He pauses, and then, in the kind of diplomatic tone that would really make his father proud, there are good days and bad days. Rambling narrator Natalie interrupts to say, On good days, I'm calm. I believe that if I do a good enough job, if I prove to the world that I really am living out here on the land as an honest woman, a good Christian, a traditional wife, then the angry women will eventually forgive me, and the momentum will swing back in my favour, and the state of Idaho will drop all its pending charges against me, the ones the lawyers warned me would come before Doug paid them all off: sexual assault, aggravated assault, improper working conditions, wire fraud, animal abuse, child abuse. Do you see? If I finally, actually and truly became the thing I claimed so long to be, then no one could call me a liar anymore. A liar anymore. A liar anymore. A liar anymore. A liar any. So she's clearly in some sort of like manic state at this point. She's like drifting in and out of like knowing what's real and not what, this reality and fantasy. It's all kind of confusing, and she doesn't always know where she is or when it is. And a lot of this, it's never fully explained, but it kind of comes down to her abusing these pills that her mother-in-law was also taking, that she's been taking. And throughout the 1800s bits, we've seen Mary preparing these remedies for her, and it turns out that the pills have been like crushed up and put into these like home remedies, and so she's been drugged this entire time. She spent the last I think it's something like 13 years essentially being drugged, and that's why she can't remember everything, but sometimes she does and sometimes she doesn't, and she's very up and down and all over the place. And then there are the bad days. You don't need to know about those, Clementine. You don't need to know about the panic attacks and the conspiracy theories, the tests from the Lord, the producers in the trees, the pebbles, the microphones, the mornings I wake up and feel so spun around I think I've been kidnapped. So it's partly the drugs, partly this big mental breakdown, to be honest. After the reveal about the medication and the herbal tonics with the crushed medication in her stuff, Clementine says, so she's constantly moving in and out of a pharmaceutical haze. Perfect. That's just perfect. And we learned that the man in the hut that she stumbled across was her son Stetson, now all grown up. And then it cuts back to the interview. So tell me if I understand this correctly. Your father-in-law resolved Shannon's lawsuit out of court and then paid the media to stop covering the story. Any person who spoke about you on social media in any speculatory fashion received a cease and desist order from his lawyers. He strong-armed local law enforcement to drop the case they were building against you, and then you, Natalie, began again. You ripped out the hardwood floors, renovated the walls and ceiling, removed all signs of modernity from your barn and farming areas. You decided to live like those olden days. For what, though? To prove a point? To protect yourself from legal troubles? You're going to need to help us make sense of this, Natalie. You're going to need to help us understand. And you know, a few years ago I might have said this was far-fetched, but actually, no, I believe it. It's a little exposition heavy at this point, but like I said earlier, at this point in the book, I don't mind it. I think it kind of works. A memory flittering past. Me and Caleb in the early days of the experiment, as she now calls it, the experiment. Explaining the game to toddler Mary. That was how we talked about it then. A game, an experiment, just a fun little trial. It was gradual, sometimes deliberate and sometimes instinctual. Like checkers, like chess, cowboys and Indians, Barbie Dreamhouse, but backwards. We're going to pretend it's the olden days, sweetie pie. The pioneer days. Just play pretend. Just a summer activity. Just a creative way for the family to bond over traditional values while we hid from the outside world and figured out a plan. Just. There was a greater plan, I swear. But at some point over the years, I really can't remember when, the hiding became the plan, the beginning and the end. The children left when Clementine turned 16. A month earlier, we had finally sold our car, the last piece of modernity we'd been holding on to. Time to live off the land, kiddos. Clementine must have known what was coming. She took the kids one morning for a walk and they never came back. She knew this woods so well. And so this really feels like the Frankie family, doesn't it? With Clementine being Sherry, like helping the younger kids and trying to protect them. Later in the book, the interviewer asks Natalie, some of your children have, as adults, become passionate activists against child exploitation on social media. How does that make you feel? And again, this makes me think of Sherry Frankie and all the good work she's doing now. So again, we've got those parallels. Doug was on board with the idea and then he wasn't. He couldn't believe we sold the car. Came to visit one day and saw Caleb digging a hole for an outhouse. He said we'd lost our effing minds. But by then it was too late. The hole we had dug, too big. Literally and metaphorically, obviously. And so he reversed slowly down the hill and never visited us again. And my mother? We weren't speaking much by then. By the time she realised what was happening, we were... It happened slowly, I say. The transition, the believing. It happened so slowly, and then So at this point, Natalie's finally kind of started to snap out of what we've been seeing over the book in this particular, like, future timeline, where, like, you know, she thought it was like a time jump. She's like, why am I not pregnant? Oh, I'm pregnant now. Blah, blah. She's kind of snapped out of that and realized the reality and is like, oh, I remember it all. It's all coming back to me. But she's also realized, crap, I haven't had my period. And so she's like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And then she says, and when I found out I was pregnant, and then I found out I was pregnant again, and everything changed. I realized I had to leave. There's a long silence in the room. I can't give birth in this place again. I added firmly, looking round at everyone. The last time, I trail off, suddenly sick. The last time with Maeve was terrible. Oh, Mum, Clementine sighs. Are you saying, Caleb shakes his head, are you saying you think you're pregnant, Natalie? I'm saying I am pregnant, I say. And I need to get rid of it. Which is huge for a Fundy woman to be saying that, but anyway. I pause, letting the full weight of their shock sink in. They must both be so shocked hearing their mother talk openly about the need for an abortion. How modern of me. See, darling? Look at this old dog with her new trick. I know it's awful, but I need to get rid of it, and soon. I must be 12 weeks along by now. Mum, Clementine says, you're 50 years old. You're not pregnant. Now it's my turn to fall silent. Come again? It was unbelievable that we could have Maeve, Caleb muttered softly, and that was 10 years ago. So the lack of periods are likely menopause, not pregnancy. So, yeah. And then there's this absolutely horrifying revelation of what happened to Maeve, the 9th child, I think it is, during the home birth. And again, this is horrible because it's so realistic, and we've seen so many fundies have these horrifying, dangerous home births where they've nearly died or their kids have, and it's heartbreaking to see. But yeah, this is what happened with Maeve, and again, realistic. Maeve's sweet thing is 10 years old. Yeah, that's right. That sweet girl, my little shadow, is, how would a modern woman say it? My daughter has learning deficiencies. My daughter is developmentally challenged. My daughter was born blue in the face, not breathing for minutes, and my husband is not a midwife, and I am not a doctor, and so we wasted precious time screaming at one another, a dead child on the floor between us, until 8-year-old Mary thought to breathe into her little sister's mouth. Horrifying, terrifying, scary as hell. Also the fact that the child, an 8-year-old child, had to step in and save her little sister's life is just heartbreaking, isn't it? God, I think I've spoken about this before in videos, but I was born not breathing. I was born with my umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. Literally, it was like suffocating me during birth. Between that and my hip problems, where like my hips were dislocated really badly and like really badly damaged, because it was such a traumatic birth. And like I say, I was born blue. I was born not breathing. Luckily, my mum, being a responsible woman, was in a hospital in the best place to be, surrounded by incredible professionals who saved my life. They got me breathing again, and at first the doctors were like, she'll probably never walk, but then luckily I have been able to walk, and while I still have a lot of hip trouble today and hip pain, and there are some days when it hurts too much to walk, there are other days when I can literally go out wearing a nice pair of heels and walk fine, and it looks like there's nothing wrong with me. So I have the ups and downs, but the point is, they saved my life, and they gave me the medical treatment I need to get me walking mostly normally, and yeah, I'm incredibly grateful for that. And I don't understand why there are so many people out there who are still like, oh, I don't need medical care, people have done it before. It's like, yeah, people have done it before and they died. People have done it before, and then you end up like this, with a child having to save the life of your other child, and you're like one of your kids essentially getting some sort of brain damage because they were born not breathing and they didn't get the care because no one trained was there to help them. Just because people have done without in the past, that doesn't mean we should need to today. And I understand not everyone can afford the medical care for giving birth in America. And that is absolutely a fundamental flaw with America's healthcare system, and in general, private paid-for healthcare systems like that, you know? The traumatic birth that my mother had with me, and me basically nearly dying and having all these health problems and my hip problems, my walking problems and stuff, that would have more than bankrupt my family if we were American, you know? But living in the UK, we get it all free on the NHS. Every single thing was covered by the NHS. Didn't cost my family a penny. Not to give birth, not for, because my mum was 38, nearly 39 when I was born, I think. Is it? Or was it 37, 38? One of them. I think she was 38 when I was born. And because of that, she was considered like a geriatric pregnancy, so she had to have a lot more care during the pregnancy. She had to have an amnio to like check how it was and check there weren't any major birth defects or anything like that. So there were a lot of complications with that pregnancy. Didn't cost my mum a thing, except like, you know, a £2 bus. Well, actually, no, it wasn't even that back then. Like a 50p bus to the hospital, you know. All the extra tests and everything, all the trauma of my birth and all the stuff that was happening there didn't cost a thing, and that's the way it should be. Genuinely, that is what we pay taxes for. That is what we pay our national insurance for, so that when we are ill, when other people get ill, it doesn't cost them a thing. So people get the care they need. And I think that's the way things should be. Yeah, and I think seeing so many experiences like this and, you know, just experiences of other people in my life and experiences I've had myself, with both like with uterus issues and other health issues and things like that. I don't understand why more people are more appreciative of the amazing medical system that we have today, that is there for us, that is saving lives. These amazing, trained, educated people who are working all hours of the day for honestly not enough pay to save our lives. You know, I think we need to show a little more appreciation and understand how lucky we are. And no, anyway, sorry, I'm rambling off script again. I keep doing this today, don't I? God, I'm so sorry. And then, oh God, I hate this bit, right? Mary speaks before Caleb can. She raises a hand. Her expression has such an emotional velocity to it that she suddenly looks like a mirror of Clementine. Are you saying that the neighbours are my brothers? So it turns out she didn't know they were her brothers, and she did have a crush on one because they're the only men she's ever seen, so she had a crush on her brother, and oh, I hate that. I hate that so much. It also turns out that there's a lot of stuff that's been going on behind the scenes that's been like hidden from Natalie, like where the food comes from and stuff like that. The fact that they're getting it from the supermarket and bringing it in rather than actually growing it themselves because they're still useless. She says, they provided food year after year, but you know what? I didn't wonder once. I have become, bear with me when I say this, a good mother effing Christian woman. I do not anymore ask questions of my husband that he does not want to hear, and my husband, oh yes, a very good Christian man, does not tell me things that I do not need to know. Again, these statements alone I could talk about for hours, right? It's fantastic. And then the big revelation. Clementine isn't just here for a visit. She is here to do a whole Cherry Frankie and rescue these kids. She's brilliant here. We love this, right? Oh yeah, did I forget to mention that? Silly me. I didn't come here for lunch. I came here for the kids. She pulls a folded up paper out of her jacket pocket. I have a warrant if you'd like to see. She hands it to Caleb. He doesn't read it, just shakes it and says, "What is this?" Something I've been wanting to do for a very long time, but couldn't until Doug ran out of money. And Stetson called the officers and agreed with everything I've been saying for years. Clementine looks at me. So thank you, Mother, for reminding my brother how crazy you truly are. Natalie panics at this point, not necessarily because the kids are being taken away and she's in trouble, but because she doesn't want to be left alone with Caleb. Which is saying something, isn't it? But Clementine's having none of this. She doesn't care. She takes the children away. She rescues them. Natalie tells Caleb she hates him. Caleb says he hates her too. Then Natalie decides once again she needs to get away. She needs to leave the ranch. She says there'll be consequences if I leave, but none so great as the consequences of staying. Well, I say impatiently, do you want to come with me or not? A long moment passes. Yes, he says. I think I do. I reach for his hand and together we walk. And that is where the main book ends, with a true toxic relationship. But we also get an epilogue 5 years later. And the interview questions from the producer in the last bit are for the interview that is happening in this section. So, we're on the very last part of the book now, the epilogue, like I say, it's 5 years later, and this scene opens with Natalie wearing ankle cuffs in what appears to be a replica of her kitchen, or maybe her actual kitchen, but she's still having these delusions and doesn't think it's really her kitchen. A man named John has been trying to get it perfect, but he's got a few details wrong, and Natalie shouts at him for it. So, from what I can tell, this is her kitchen on the same ranch, but they've redecorated it for this interview and to look like it looked in her influencer days, I think. I'm not sure. A producer, who may or may not be named Lucy, she is named Lucy, is trying to ask Natalie questions like, Natalie, can I ask you a question? When we were driving up to the house, did you look out the window? I hesitate, then say yes. So you saw when we turned into your old dirt road. I've always hated games, and this feels like a game. Yes. And you saw the mountains and the big red barn? Yes. So help me understand. How could this not be your house? I open my mouth and close it. Suddenly I feel unmoored. Do you see how I might be confused, Natalie? Well, yes, I say, but... So she's definitely still having these delusions. She doesn't understand why she is. There's like a definite disconnect from reality, both from trauma, religious, and just years of an abusive, toxic relationship and life, and the mental health problems that she's having, plus the years and years and years of whatever medication she's been constantly fed. This is when Natalie's old roommate, Rena, shows up, and she is absolutely shocked to see Natalie, who is now 55. So is she, they're both 55, but she's like, oh my god, it's been years, obviously. I'm so shocked by how you look. Rena is the one who's going to be interviewing Natalie for a news show that she is now the anchor of. So Rena's smashing it. She's doing really well. We love that for her. It is on the advice of Natalie's lawyers because she apparently needs to engender sympathy with the public. I can only assume because the numerous charges against her have finally landed her in prison. Child endangerment, animal abuse, and so on. And through this whole process, even with all her mental health problems, even with everything going on, even with all the consequences of her actions that she's facing, Natalie is still the same rude, mean, stuck-up person she has been throughout this whole book. All right, Rena says. She's smiling now. And forgive me, Natalie, but you do know this interview will be seen by quite a lot of people. Oh yeah, a nearby camera girl says. It's pretty much guaranteed to go viral. Virality, I inform the girl mildly, is a curse. But yes, I look at Rena. I'm aware of how this will work. I'm not an idiot, you know. Of course you're not, God, Rena, you were always so annoying. I survey her bemused expression. I was always prettier than you, but I'll admit, you look fine for your age. That's very nice of you. This is a huge win for her career, this interview with me. I'm surprised she hasn't thanked me yet. So, Natalie still has these, big delusions of grandeur that we've been seeing throughout the book, you know? I mean, Rena's smashing it. She's a news anchor, she's got a great life, she's got a family, she's happy as hell. Natalie has literally had all her kids taken away from her, is going to be going to prison, has spent her life in a toxic marriage. God knows what's happening with that. And yet she's still looking down on Rena, this happy, successful woman. It's so sad. It's so, so sad. Rena starts her interview, and I'm not quite sure if it's been broadcast live. I can't figure that out. But anyway, she starts it, and Rena looks into the bright white light. My name is Rena Magliotti. I'm the nightly news anchor for WUBZ Chicago, and I am Natalie Heller Mills' former roommate. Crisp smile. A few months ago, I received a call from ABC News with a highly unusual request. They were hoping to interview Natalie, who is currently serving out a 30-year prison sentence for 4 counts of aggravated child abuse, among other lesser charges. I was told that Natalie was interested in having a conversation, only if the conversation in question was with me. To say I was surprised by this request would be an understatement. Tonight, I want to get to the bottom of why exactly Natalie would choose me of all people to interview her. Great, love this for Rena. Very, very interesting. Also, again, that 30-year sentence feels very Ruby Frankie. So again, it's clear the author has really pulled from real life as inspiration for this book in a way that makes it feel really accurate, and I love this. It's great. Really well done. But not in a way that's disrespectful to the people involved or the victims or anything like that. Just in a way that feels very real. But before we get any further, Rena asks Natalie what she thinks about the memoir her daughter Mary has just released. Again, feels very Ruby and Sherry Frankie coded, doesn't it? The book ends with us getting to read a little passage from Mary's book, which includes some really heartbreaking lines about how she was basically parentified. Then the little girl grew up and realised her mama was sick. When she was old enough to understand, Pa told the little girl her mama was filled with evil spirits. He said it was her job now to take care of the house and her siblings. He told her she needed to become a mother for her own mama, and so she did. Heartbreaking. No child should have to go through that and parent their own parent, you know? Especially not when her husband's right there. He could have been doing so much more. Caleb is the worst. Natalie's also the worst. There's a lot of bad people in this. The book finally ends, though, with Mary telling Natalie through her book that she misses her and how she's sad for how much of life and the world she's missed out on. And that's where the book ends. It's a brilliant ending to a brilliant book, and I, as you can probably tell throughout this video, I have so much to praise it for. There are, like I mentioned, a couple of very light criticisms I have of it. So, for example, I wish there had been a little more detail at times put into the 1800s timeline, or future as we now know it was. I wish we'd seen a few more details about like her relationship with the kids and how she treated the kids, and there was definitely like evidence of some child abuse, but I kind of wish we'd seen more of it on the page. Not that I enjoy seeing that, I think it would have been good to see how differently she treated her first lot of kids and this lot, and how different their relationships were. I think it also would have been really interesting, just in general throughout the whole book, to see more about the differences between how the girls and the boys were parented, between the kids, both in sort of both timelines, in the modern day and the 1800s, if you will. I'm still calling them that to make it clear which ones I mean, even though we now know it's like present and future. But yeah, I think it would have been really interesting to look at the differences in how the boys and girls were raised a little bit more. There were definitely some examples in there, but I think it could have been expanded on a bit more. I also wish her relationship with old Caleb in the 1800s timeline was expanded on a bit more. I wish that was in there. I think maybe we could have had a little more explanation about what exactly was going on with Natalie to make her have these mental health episodes. A bit of an explanation about what that was and what was going on. Maybe more of an explanation about why she couldn't remember certain stuff. And a bit, like, I wish it had been a bit clearer at the end of what exactly she did remember and didn't. But that's kind of the issue with having an unreliable narrator, is that you never really know. So that was done well, but part of me just wished for a little more explanation there, for that to be a little clearer. But yeah, those few criticisms are minor details, really. I think for what we did get from this book, it's absolutely fantastic. I'm basically, with those criticisms, I'm just asking, like, for a little more icing sugar on top of my cake, you know? Like, it doesn't need those things. They just would have made it even more good. That the word, you know what I'm trying to say? It would have made it even better. There we go. They're the words I'm looking for. Oh gosh, sorry. It's currently past 3 a.m. I'm getting very tired. Where am I at? Yeah, but overall, I thought this was a fantastic book.
Okay, just editing me jumping in quickly was like a couple of other points that I've been thinking about while I've been editing that I didn't mention in my original script. And one of the big things is the heights on the door when she first wakes up in the 1800s, and how they're like marked with years, like 18 whatever, which makes me think, like, did they do that on purpose to kind of really lean into the delusion, or like, why is it there? Is it just to throw the reader, or is there like an in-world reason for it? Like, she wanted to try and make it as authentic as possible, or do they actually mean something else? Like, maybe it was like, I don't know, I was going to say the 18th of, I don't know, there's something. The other thing was, I feel like this book could have also worked if it really did have that, like, sci-fi element, and there really was a time travel element to it, of seeing, like, what life was really like. And then if it had, like, kind of Natalie learning her lesson and being like, oh, things weren't really better back then, that was kind of what I was expecting from the book, and I think it would have been a really good and interesting take to have. But I'm not mad that it didn't do it and that it went the way it went. I just think it could have been really cool, because she could have been, like, rambling on about, like, what about, like, my world and this and cameras and phones, and you know, she asks where her phone is and everyone's like, are you crazy? And then she starts rambling on about stuff, and maybe she gets, like, accused of witchcraft or something. That could have been a really fun thing to do, and seeing how bad, like, women were treated back then. But it, as it is, like, with the story we have, I do wonder, like, why didn't she ask these things? If she's just waking up, why isn't she like, where's my phone? Where's this? Why doesn't she ask those questions? And I get why, from a book's perspective, she didn't, because they would have been like, we got rid of them, and that would have answered it straight away. But kind of in story, I want to be like, well, why didn't she ask? Why didn't she think she could ask? Like, that's a very, very minor plot hole for me, but it's there. The other thing that I kind of wish was answered that wasn't, was where did her memories go from the last, like, what was it, 15 years, 20, yeah, like 15 years or so. Where did those memories go? And why did she only, like, wake up at this point? And why did the narrative start there in particular? What triggered her to, like, lose those memories and come back now? Or is this, like, a thing that we keep seeing happens in cycles? It's kind of hinted that it's cyclical, but in that case, I don't know, I kind of just wish there was a little bit more explanation there for that. The other thing that I forgot to talk about in my main video that I do want to mention is there were questions that I've seen people ask about Natalie and Caleb's sexualities, and A lot of people being like, well, does this mean like Natalie was actually gay the whole time and that's the whole thing? And I don't think it was. I think it all ties into Natalie's weird ideas around consent and just kind of sex in general, to be honest, because I don't think what she did to Natalie was fueled by attraction. It was a power move. To her, sex has always been something that, like, she's seen men use to dominate women, and that's kind of the culture she's been brought up in. So if she did assault Natalie in that way, I think it was a means of asserting power over her, not about sexual attraction. I don't think there's anything in that book that suggests Natalie had any attraction to women. She just saw that kind of act as something dominant, something aggressive. At least that's my opinion anyway. I think a bigger question was around Caleb's sexuality. I thought that was kind of in question at first, until he slept with Shannon, and I was like, oh, so maybe, no, he does like women. There's just like this whole purity culture thing getting in his head and a lack of sex education, which means that, you know, that aspect of their relationship as a couple has suffered. Again, that's something that I wish we'd seen explored in a little bit more detail, but one book can't do everything, so I'm not mad that it wasn't. Yeah, I don't have a huge amount to say on the Shannon debate because we didn't really get a lot of her, but I found it interesting. At first I thought she was like, you know, one of us undercover, essentially, like a bit of a snarker, a bit of a critic of fundies, and she was going undercover to like uncover things. But then when we saw that like interview of her, like she gave these answers of how, like, you know, she idealized women like Natalie, and her and all her friends were following this and they wanted to be TradWives too, and she thought the message she was putting out was so brilliant, she wanted to work for her. And I do think she was just like a naive, impressionable, very young girl who believed in all this stuff and then very quickly became disillusioned by it. And then when she was like kind of lost and not really sure what to do, the media kind of snapped her up and was like, well, you know, if you're going to tell this story and expose this and this, you need to look a certain way and do that. So I think throughout the whole, like, I think Shannon's whole character arc was her just being like molded and turned into this like ideal sort of person by all these like influences around her. And I do kind of wish we'd seen a little bit more of her, but I think even by the end of the book she wasn't quite sure who she was, but she was starting to do the right thing. But I mean, she was only 21, so that's like a whole part of growing up, isn't it, and figuring out who you are. Yeah, I find it quite complex. How do I say this? I feel like in some ways the book might have been better if the whole Caleb sleeping with Shannon thing hadn't happened, but you also needed that inciting incident for Natalie to attack Shannon in that way, for everything to happen and kick off. But I feel like there were maybe other things that could have done that were more consistent with their characters. So maybe either we'd seen Caleb being a bit inappropriate with other women before, and so we kind of knew that was a character trait of his, which didn't make it shocking, or we could have had a different inciting incident. So, for example, Natalie criticized, for example, Shannon criticized Natalie one too many times, or questioned her parenting techniques, or posted some content without her consent, or made a mistake and accidentally posted content that revealed something bad about her or something like that. I feel like there could have been a different inciting incident like that, but yeah, what it is absolutely fine. I feel like perhaps the people who are questioning Natalie's sexuality are maybe, how do I put this? Because I've made a lot of comparisons between the characters and real life fundies and content creators that we know, and one of the big parallels I've made is between Natalie and Ruby Frankie. And obviously there were speculations about Ruby Frankie and oh my gosh, who's the other Connections woman now? No, I'm sorry, my mind's gone blank. I'll put the name on screen when I edit this. But there were questions around Ruby's relationship with the woman from Connections, and even Sherry in her book gave these revolutions about, like, them sharing bedrooms and sharing a bed and all this sort of thing, and saying there might have been something in their relationship. And I feel like because there's so many parallels between Ruby and Natalie, people might be looking at that and being like, well, was that an aspect of Natalie's character as well? Because it was in Ruby. But I didn't really see that personally in Natalie, and I think that's a big difference between them. Because we have to remember Natalie is fictional. She is this amalgamation of lots of real life people and also some completely fictional made up elements. So yeah. Okay, I think that is me done. Okay, actually forgive me. It's late at night, I've just finished editing the entire video and I've got one more thing I want to add in, and that's that I've seen people mad about the discussions of racism in this book, or lack of. And one person said, like, sure, they show that Natalie's racist, they show that her father-in-law's racist, but there's never any consequences of that. And again, that's the point. She's a white, cis, straight, upper-class woman. Of course there's no consequences of racism for her. Of course her being racist doesn't affect her, and that's the exact point and the problem. She doesn't even realise how bad her actions and views are. She never sees the consequences that they have on other people, because she's just so sheltered and stuck in her own stupid little world and stuck in her own little bubble, and she doesn't give a damn about anyone else or how her views and actions and how the politics of her literal father-in-law are affecting other people. She doesn't care, and that's the point. That's the criticism of Natalie. She can say all this racist nonsense and she never faces any consequences for it. Not really. So I understand that people maybe wanted to see her face some consequences. They want to see some more discussion around it. But I think as readers, we know it's bad. We know there are consequences for it. The problem is she doesn't. So she can't discuss it in the book because, like, she doesn't know about it. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm making sense anymore. I'm so tired. But yeah, you know what I mean.
There's a bit of a trend at the minute of like TradWives featuring in books of various genres. Another one that I've seen recommended in the comments today was a book actually called TradWife, which has been on my to read list for a little while. And I haven't read it yet, but I would like to. Maybe that's another one I can review if you guys are interested. But I think it's really good that popular fiction is bringing these issues kind of more into the forefront of the public eye and so on. I think it's really good. Sorry, this bit's all off script at the end here, and my head is so fuzzy, and I'm so tired, and my brain is so overworked at the minute, isn't it? Yeah, so I'm not quite sure what I'm saying anymore. But the point is, I love this book. I think there's so many really good things about it. That was the other thing I was going to say. My other thing is, I wish we'd seen a little bit more from Shannon in the aftermath of the assault and her outing the family and all of that. I wish we'd seen a little bit more of her perspective there, heard a little bit more of that, heard a little bit more about what happened to her, and hopefully how she recovered from it. I wish that I'd been in there. But again, I understand it wasn't. This book is from Natalie's perspective, and she's so self-centered, she wouldn't give a damn. So of course we didn't get that covered. But it's just something where I wish we'd seen it. I want to know what happened to her. I want to know that story, but I understand why it wasn't covered in here because of who Natalie is. So again, it's not something that makes the book bad. It's just, that little extra bit that I wanted. But yeah, that's me done for today. This has been a long video. I didn't expect it to be this long. I just have so many things to say. And honestly, there's so much more about this book that I absolutely haven't covered yet. So if you haven't read it yet, I thoroughly recommend you go out and read it for yourself, because even though I've covered a lot in this video, there's still so much you can get out of this, and I really, really think you'll enjoy it. So, and also it's just been really nice to talk about a book that I like for this long, for once, Normally on this channel, the videos that do better are, I guess, the more negative reviews, which is fine. It can be really fun to do bad book reviews, but I also really like talking about books that I do like as well. So I do have a few videos like that here on my main channel. You can go check out. I've got like a whole happy stuff playlist of, it's nice happy stuff, things that I like talking about. So some good books, some good poetry. I've got some history videos on there, a little bit of everything really. Some videos talking about like mushrooms and fungi and stuff like that. But also over on my second channel, I have been posting, there's all sorts of happy stuff over there about like gigs that I've been to, and I do these like monthly reading wrap-ups. I'm a little bit behind at the minute because losing Coup got me behind, and I've still got marches to record, and now we're nearly at the end of April, so I'm going to have that to record soon. But at the end of every month, for this year, I've been doing these little reading wrap-ups of like, this is everything I've read in the book, this is everything I've read in the month, here are my brief thoughts on everything, and I point out which books I really loved. And this year has been fantastic for reading. I have read some damn good books this year. It's probably been my best reading year yet. for like the amount of sheer good books I've read. It's been fascinating. And because of that, I've been like reading a lot more, because like, you know, I haven't been getting down from reading some disappointing books. It's just been like one great book after another, and I'm loving it. So if you want to check those out, they're not as in-depth as videos like this, but they're over on my second channel, and they're just a nice little bit of happiness, and maybe you'll get some book recommendations of stuff that you'll enjoy too. March is going to be a good one when I record it. I read a ton of thrillers, a bunch of horror books, and oh my god, were they good. Oh, it's exciting. Sadly though, this month I have read a bad horror book, and that is another video that I've written a script for, because I'm not going to tell you what it is just yet. You're going to have to wait and see. But it's a book that had so much potential, and there's bits in it that have the potential to be really good. Like the whole monster in it, if you will, is so damn creepy. The whole premise is creepy. It's all based on Japanese folklore, and oh my god, the setting, the folklore behind it, the whole history of the setting could have been so damn good. It was fantastic. And then the book itself was a mixture of terrible writing and the most annoying characters and a plot that just, it could have been amazing and was just a massive letdown. So I've got a whole video ranting about that that's going to come out on this channel very soon. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that with you. Sorry, I'm going off topic here. I'm just having a little ramble. But for now, yeah, please let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you have any other books you would like me to review, or any other content you'd like me to respond to or talk about or things like that, please let me know down in the comments. I'm working a lot at the minute, and it's been a nice distraction since losing Cuckoo. And like I said earlier, I think I'm working on like 6 or 7 concurrent videos at the minute. So I've got lots and lots of really good content for you. Like I say, I've got this video, I've got 2 Morgan and Cole podcast responses, and they've released another episode since. So I'm going to watch that, script that, probably make a review for that soon. I've got the horror book review, that's 4. I've got a second channel video unboxing this gorgeous little girly. I've got a second channel video that is all recorded, but I just need to do a voiceover for, where I'm making this little cutie, which is a mini museum to Kyra. So you can see me make this over on my second channel soon. I've just got to record the voiceover, and then that'll be ready for you guys. How many is that? Oh, and then I have a response to, I think I alluded to it earlier in this video. There's a horrific website out there called Motherless, I think it is, which is basically a porn website, and on it there's a category called Sleep, in which men have been recording themselves drugging their wives and partners and girlfriends and then raping them in their sleep. And they have also been charging other men to watch this on live streams and taking requests from these men in return for money about what they're going to do to their wives to assault them. There's a whole massive Telegram group with like 1,000 men all telling each other how to do this, selling drugs to each other to knock their partners out, and it's vile and disgusting. However, there is also a lot of misinformation out there around this story, and some misleading numbers and figures. So I'm talking about that story in depth, and like correcting the misinformation, telling you what you need to know and what this means, and looking into some of the theory behind just generally rape culture and the issues surrounding that. And it's going to be quite a heavy video, but it's all scripted, and I'm ready to record it soon. It's just, yeah, it's going to be a heavy one, but I think it's important to talk about. So anyway, thank you for listening to me ramble right now. Like I say, let me know your thoughts on this book and this video. Let me know what videos you want me to make in the future. And for now, thank you so much for watching today. Thank you for sticking with me throughout this video. If you'd like to see more from me, you can go follow me over on Instagram at Rachel Oates with a 0. I post all kinds of fun photos of like nature photography, places I've been on day trips, hanging out with my lovely friends, going to lots of gigs, because I also am a live music photographer in my spare time, which is always really fun. Recently I've just been going to a bunch of gigs for fun and taking my little Fuji, so my photos aren't anything special. I often get photo passes to music festivals and concerts, so I can go and take photos there, and I photograph some really cool bands. So if you want to keep up with that, you can follow me on Instagram. And if you'd like to help support my work, because obviously a lot of my videos do get demonetized because of the serious subject matter, you know, TradWives and fundies and religious trauma, abuse, rape, you know, all the serious stuff that needs talking about, but sadly isn't advertiser friendly. Yeah, a lot of my videos do get demonetized, which often means YouTube will put ads on them, but not actually pay me for it. So if you want to help support me, I do have Patreon, I have channel memberships, and I also have merch available on my merch store, and photography and art prints available on my web store on my website. All the links are down in the video description if you want to go check them out. There's everything there. And I've got a couple of books out too, with poetry and photography and art and essays and all that lovely stuff. So you can do that. I'm so bad at this whole self-promotion thing, but I think I've got it all this time. So it is 3:15 in the morning. I am exhausted, but thank you for being here with me today. I appreciate this. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, and hopefully it's not as late where you are, and if it is, I hope you can sleep soon. But otherwise, have a great day. Be kind to people. I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you guys again very soon. From me and the little cuddle coo. Bye, guys. Gorgeous girl. Obviously, she'll never replace my actual Kyra, but it's so nice having someone to hug again. Like, she's the same size as my Kyra, so it's so nice to have her. Like, I can pat a little bum like I would Kyra. It's just, yeah, no one will ever replace Coo, but it's nice having someone to hug in the meantime, you know?